Chapter 2457. Daunting but not dangerous. Zhuowen secretly took out the blood jade, and looked at old man Tusida with vigilance. The blood jade was given to him by the mysterious head in the blood-stained cliff. It was said that this item could help him escape from a life-and-death crisis. The mysterious head was a Dao-confirming expert when it was alive. Therefore, the blood jade it gave was definitely not simple. Zhuowen didn't dare to be careless when facing old man Tusida, who was a life-and-death realm expert. "Senior, Desireless is my best friend. Only now did I know that she has become a Desireless of the Six Desires Palace. This is also the reason why this junior is willing to risk his life to save her." Zhuowen cupped his fists and said. Old Lord Tushita looked at Zhuowen in astonishment. His gaze was filled with a strange color as he said, "She's actually your best friend. You're really too unlucky. Desireless is truly powerless to reverse the situation. It's basically impossible to return to the past. Moreover, that old hag Wujue must have some sort of trump card in order to control Desireless. You don't need to do something superfluous. I'll help you kill her. Senior, forgive me for not being able to comply." Zhuowen's gaze turned cold. His right hand suddenly pointed down, and the sun in the sky suddenly fell and heavily smashed towards old man Tusida. Old Lord Tushita frowned slightly. He really couldn't understand why a mere 8 steps void sky ant would dare to attack him, an expert of the two extremes of life and death. "Since you're courting death, I'll fulfill your wish." Old man Tusida sneered. He swung the horsetail whisk in his hand and smashed it against the sun. Then, Zhuowen's pupils shrunk. He discovered that the powerful sun had actually been smashed into countless specks of light by the horsetail whisk. However, the sun wasn't completely useless. Old man Tusida's movements also paused for a moment because of this. Zhuowen took advantage of this moment to immediately carry Moyan of Wushang and fly forward. At the same time, the torch dragon wings on his back unfolded and turned into a bolt of lightning. Old Lord Tusida sneered and gently stroked the horsetail whisk in his hand. A wave of black and white energy transformed into an endless rope that shot out and wrapped around Zhuowen. Zhuowen took out the king's sword and suddenly activated the death chi on the surface. He ruthlessly slashed at the rope and actually cut it apart. This guy actually has death chi. Old Lord Tusida let out a soft cry of surprise and immediately summoned his horsetail whisk. The white hairs at the front of the whisk transformed into a boundless wall, blocking Zhuowen's path forward. Zhuowen turned around and stared coldly at the slowly approaching Old Lord Tusida. He began to grip the blood jade in his hand tightly. He hoped that the mysterious head hadn't lied to him and that the power of the blood jade could really stop Old Lord Tusida. Old Lord Tusida also noticed the blood jade in Zhuowen's hand. His casual look suddenly turned serious, and his footsteps came to a halt. "What are you holding in your hand?" Old Lord Tusida's eyes flickered. At his level of cultivation, there was basically nothing that could cause him to feel a great sense of danger. However, the blood jade in Zhuowen's hand was an exception. Old Lord Tusida actually felt an extremely strong sense of danger from the blood rain. This was the first time in countless years that Old Lord Tusida felt such a strong sense of danger, so he subconsciously asked. Zhuowen took a deep breath and said, "Senior, I obtained this blood jade by accident from the corpse of a dead expert who had attained the Tao." Zhuowen didn't say much and stopped there. He knew that the reputation of a Tao affirmation expert was greater than anything else. It was enough to make Old Lord Tusida apprehensive. He only had one chance to obtain the blood jade. If he could use it to make Old Lord Tusida cower, then it couldn't be better. After all, he had no enmity with Old Lord Tusida. If he had no other choice, he really didn't want to make an enemy of such an expert. Old Lord Tusida narrowed his eyes and said excitedly, "Where did you see the remains of a Tao affirmation expert? Tell me." Zhuowen's eyes flickered and he said in a deep voice, "As long as you let me go, I won't mind telling you." If you still don't intend to let me go, then I can only activate this blood jade and fight with my life on the line." Old Lord Tusita calmed down and looked at the blood jade in fear. He knew that Zhuowen wasn't lying. At his level of cultivation, there was nothing that could threaten him unless it was something of a Tao affirmation expert. Since this blood jade could make him feel such a strong sense of danger, it couldn't be anything other than something of a Tao affirmation expert. After pondering for a moment, Old Lord Tusita nodded and said, "I can let you go, but Desireless is a scourge. Palace Master Wu Ju's method is buried in his body. Taking him away is equivalent to letting Palace Master Wu Ju know your location." Speaking up to this point, Old Lord Tusita took out a jade box and threw it to Zhuowen, saying, "This jade box contains a kind of medicinal powder that can block the imprints of life and death experts. However, it has a time limit. I advise you to take Desireless and leave the 6 Desires Heavenly Domain. That way, that old hag Wu Ju won't be able to find you." Zhuowen took the jade box and scanned it with his divine sense. He found that it was indeed a medicinal powder. However, he wasn't sure if this medicinal powder was real, so he had to go to the pill tower to verify it. "Thank you, Senior. The location of the Tao affirmation expert is recorded in this jade slip. If Senior wants to go there, you can go there according to the records in this jade slip." Zhuowen took out a jade slip and threw it to Old Lord Tusita. Then, he took out the space-time wheel and immediately left this place. Old Lord Tusita took the jade slip and scanned it with his divine sense. He frowned slightly and said, "It's actually the space-time quicksand river. The space-time disk shattered there. I didn't expect to find the remains of a Tao affirmation expert after leaving the space-time disk. I have to go there and take a look." Zhuowen didn't lie to Old Lord Tusita. However, what was in the deepest part of the space-time quicksand river wasn't the remains of a Tao affirmation expert, but a Tao affirmation expert who was still alive. Although it was only a head, its strength shouldn't be much weaker than Old Lord Tusita. At this moment, the explosion in the 6 Desires Heavenly Domain finally came to an end. Old Lord Tusita took a step forward and re-entered the desolate domain. His yin-yang pillfish was still fighting with spring white snow, so he couldn't just ignore it. As soon as Old Lord Tusita entered the desolate domain, he saw that Yemazi was seriously injured and flying backwards. Palace Master Wujue was holding spring white snow and constantly plucking the zither strings. She was planning to kill Yemazi in one fell swoop. Old Lord Tusita naturally wouldn't let this happen. He urged the yin-yang pillfish to fall to the side and blocked all of Palace Master Wujue's attack. "Old Lord Tusita, where's Desireless?" Palace Master Wujue took a few steps back and asked Old Lord Tusita with eyes that were spitting fire. Old Lord Tusita smiled faintly and said, "As long as you hand over the Desireless cultivation technique, I'll tell you Desireless whereabouts." Palace Master Wujue sneered. Desireless had her mark on him. As long as Desireless was still alive, she could find him. Chapter 2458. Cunning. Palace Master Wujue's pupils shrunk. She immediately tried to sense the imprint on Desireless' body. Indeed, it was as Old Lord Tusita had said. She had indeed lost the connection with the imprint. "You old bastard!" Palace Master Wujue was furious. However, she did not attack again. Old Lord Tusita's strength was not inferior to hers. Furthermore, he was even more proficient in using the yin-yang pill fish in his hand. If she were to continue fighting, she would definitely suffer. Furthermore, when Palace Master Wujue fought against Yemazi, although she managed to injure Yemazi, she had also suffered serious injuries. If she were to fight against Old Lord Tusita now, she would undoubtedly be at a disadvantage. The corners of Old Lord Tusita's mouth curled into a smile. He said, "Palace Master Wujue, I believe that you're a smart person. I don't want the original 6 Desires cultivation technique from you. I only want you to give me a copy of it. After that, I'll give you the whereabouts of Desireless. Palace Master Wujue's long, shapely eyebrows slightly creased. However, her eyes were already filled with interest. Compared to the Desireless cultivation technique, Palace Master Wujue was naturally more important to Desireless. One must know that it was extremely difficult to obtain such a perfect Desireless. She did not wish to lose Desireless just like that. The two of you, let's go to the Six Desires Palace to discuss this matter in detail. Palace Master Wujue put away the spring snow and made an inviting gesture. The corners of old Lord Tusida's mouth curled into a smile. He chuckled and also put away the yin-yang pill fish. Together with Yema Zi, he followed behind Palace Master Wujue. Whoosh! 5 days later, a ray of light rapidly streaked across the starry sky. In the end, it stopped in the Pill Furnace star field. Although Zhuowen had spent quite a bit of time following Palace Master Jingyun to the Six Desires star field, he only spent 5 days to return. However, Zhuowen knew that the main reason for this was because he had operated the space-time wheel with all his strength. The space-time wheel was many times faster than Palace Master Jingyun's flight divine tool. After Zhuowen returned to the Pill Pagoda, he immediately notified the second elder. On the 10th floor of the Pill Pagoda, the second elder's gaze was solemn as he looked at Desireless before him. Zhuowen stood to the side, while the pill flame was still lazily lying within the brazier in the center. As for the Pill Emperor Turtle, it was at the edge of the brazier. Second elder, your knowledge of medicinal pills is much better than mine. Can you take a look at this medicinal powder and see if there's any problem? Zhuowen took out a jade box and handed it to the second elder. Although Zhuowen didn't trust old Monarch Tusida too much, Zhuowen still smeared a portion of the medicinal powder on Desireless' body before leaving. He knew very well that if he waited until he reached the Pill Pagoda, his position would be exposed. Thus, he could only try everything he could. Moreover, the second elder's alchemy skills were extremely outstanding. Even if there was a problem with the medicinal powder, Zhuowen would be able to find out immediately. At that time, he would be able to solve the problem. After examining the medicinal powder, the second elder's gaze immediately turned serious. He said in a deep voice, "Zhuo Xiaoyu, this medicinal powder is indeed an extremely powerful medicinal powder capable of concealing the aura of the imprint. However, this medicinal powder itself has a strange fragrance. This fragrance is simply a superfluous component to this medicinal powder." I'm afraid, hearing those words, Zhuowen's gaze instantly sank. Although the second elder didn't say it clearly, he knew that old Monarch Tusida had deliberately placed this fragrance on Desireless' body. He didn't even need to think to guess the purpose of this. That damned old bastard, he's really a wily old fox. Zhuowen cursed in his heart. However, he felt extremely helpless. Whether it was old Monarch Tusida or Palace Master Wujue, these two terrifying experts of the life and death boundary, they had both left an imprint on Desireless' body. This caused Zhuowen to feel somewhat vexed. Moreover, he had already sprinkled a portion of the medicinal powder on Desireless' body. He was afraid that old Monarch Tusida would quickly follow the fragrance to find him. "Zhuo Xiaoyu, this fragrance is extremely obscure, but it's extremely long-lasting. If I'm not wrong, the person who deliberately created this fragrance can cross the entire heaven domain to follow this fragrance to find you." The second elder hesitated for a moment before finally speaking his worries. From the fragrance of this medicinal powder, he knew that the person who could refine this medicinal powder was definitely not an ordinary cultivator. He was an extremely terrifying expert. The second elder didn't know when Zhuowen had provoked such an expert. Therefore, he had no choice but to warn him. Zhuowen's complexion became even more unsightly. In his heart, he continuously cursed old Monarch Tusida for being extremely cunning. However, he also knew that he had to leave the Pill Pagoda as soon as possible. Otherwise, he would definitely implicate the people of the Pill Pagoda. Zhuowen cupped his fists and said, "Second Elder, I've indeed offended an expert. Moreover, it's an expert of the life and death boundary. I'm afraid that this time, it's a matter of life and death. Therefore, I'll take my clone with me. Also, can I borrow the Pill Fire and the Pill Emperor Turtle?" After saying this, Zhuowen was still somewhat hesitant. His clone was his, but the Pill Fire belonged to the Pill Pagoda. He wasn't sure if the second elder would lend it to him or not. "What? You've offended an expert of the life and death boundary. Could it be Palace Master Wujue of the Six Desires Palace?" The second elder cried out in alarm. Zhuowen bitterly smiled but didn't reply. He knew that he wouldn't be able to explain it clearly in a short time. Seeing that Zhuowen didn't reply, the second elder took it as Zhuowen's tacit agreement. He lightly sighed and said, "Do you think that the Pill Fire will remain in the Pill Pagoda after your clone leaves? I only hope that if you can escape this calamity, you can let your clone return to the Pill Pagoda." Zhuowen was startled. Soon after, he revealed a happy expression and cupped his fists towards the second elder, saying, "Many thanks, second elder. This Zhuo still has a request. I hope that the second elder can agree to it. Don't hesitate to ask. If this old man can help you, I'll definitely help you," the second elder said. Zhuowen pointed at Desireless and said, "Second elder, have you heard of the Six Desires Palace's Desireless cultivation technique and Desireless?" The second elder's gaze turned cold. Soon after, he looked at Desireless and said in astonishment, "You said that this person is desireless?" "That's right, his five senses have all been sealed. This is indeed the sign of desireless. It's just that in the countless years of the Six Desires Palace, apart from the founder of the Six Desires Palace, there hasn't been a desireless. But now one has actually appeared?" After saying this, the second elder looked at Zhuowen. As if he had guessed something, he said, "Do you want to restore this desireless Six Desires?" Zhuowen nodded seriously and said, "Yes, this woman is a very important friend of mine. If second elder knows the method to restore the Six Desires, I hope that second elder won't be stingy with your guidance. This Zhuowen will be very grateful." The second elder's eyes flickered. He muttered to himself for a while and said, "The Six Desires Palace's desireless cultivation technique is extremely famous. However, there are really too few desireless people. Originally, I was powerless. However, there are records of it in the ancient books of the Pill Pagoda. Wait a moment, I'll go and look for it." After saying this, the second elder entered the depths of the Pill Pagoda. Clearly, he was going to look for the ancient books. As for Zhuowen, a hopeful look appeared in his eyes. Chapter 2459. Alchemy Book. Not long after, the second elder returned with a dilapidated yellow book in his hand. He handed the book over to Zhuowen and said, "This is an alchemy book passed down from our pill tower. However, the content inside is extremely complicated. Even I can't understand it. However, there seems to be a method to restore the Six Desires. Take a look." Zhuowen thanked him and took the alchemy book. When his divine sense swept through the alchemy book, he was immediately dumbfounded. Zhuowen had never seen the words recorded in the alchemy book. Or rather, he couldn't recognize a single word. This wasn't the language of the 8 heavenly domains. The second elder saw Zhuowen's puzzled look and smiled bitterly. "Zhuo Xiaoyu, you don't have to look at me like that. I'm not too sure about this either. This alchemy book is the oldest alchemy book in our pill tower. The words inside are also extremely strange. However, there are some words recorded on the back of this alchemy book. It's about the method to restore the Six Desires. It should be added later on." Zhuowen took a closer look. Just as the second elder said, he did see some familiar words on the back of the book. These words should be the pill formula of some kind of pill. There were a total of 6 kinds of divine herbs recorded in the book. However, he only knew 3 of them. There were two that he had never heard of before. These 6 divine herbs were the prime purity calamity heart, celestial dipper crystal, origin golden essence flower, void bone refining ginseng, 8 trigrams dipper yang water, and grand essence twin dragon ganoderma. Among them, the prime purity calamity heart, the heavenly dipper god restoring crystal, and the origin golden essence flower were all extremely precious level 9 divine herbs. Furthermore, Zhuo had obtained quite a bountiful harvest in the divine pellet secret realm, so he had 3 level 9 divine herbs with him. However, Zhuo had never heard of the void bone refining ginseng, 8 trigrams dipper yang water, and grand essence twin dragon ganoderma. Could these 3 be level 9 divine herbs? Second Patriarch had also noticed the confusion in Zhuowen's eyes. He gave a bitter smile and said, "These 6 divine herbs are all the best among all level 9 divine herbs. Among them, the Shang-Qing Calamity Heart, the Heavenly Dipper Divine Crystal, and the Origin Golden Essence Flower can be found in the Divine Pill Secret Realm, but the other 3 divine herbs can't be found even in the Divine Pill Secret Realm." Zhuo nodded and said, "I have these 3 divine medicines on me. Second Elder, do you know where I can get the other 3? The second elder said in a deep voice, "As far as I know, the great void bone refining ginseng, the 8 trigrams divining yang water, and the great simplicity double dragon ganoderma mainly grow in the heavenly domain of China. I remember that there is an extremely famous dangerous place in the heavenly domain of China called the Boundless Taishu. These 3 divine medicines should grow in that dangerous place." Zhuowen's eyes narrowed. He'd never imagined that he would actually have to make a trip back to the heaven domain in the end. Speaking of which, he'd sacrificed himself to help Sky Saint comprehend a trace of the 9th level Tao insight, and then he'd left the heaven domain and never returned. He knew very well that the master-disciple relationship between him and Sky Saint had long been settled at that moment. At the thought of Sky Saint, Zhuo thought of Su Qi again. Before Su Qi died, he'd given him a purple jade, and he'd felt the power of Tao insight in that purple jade. Moreover, Su Qi's ancestor had also comprehended Tao insight, and he'd even comprehended the 8th level Tao insight. However, he'd mysteriously disappeared. Zhuo had planned to make a trip to the Su family, but he'd been in a hurry to break through, so he'd gone to the 6 Desires star domain first. Now that the heavenly domain of China was mentioned, Zhuo thought of the Su family again. Back then, the ancestor of the Su family couldn't have disappeared for no reason. It was very likely that there was still some kind of teleportation array or spacetime tunnel in the Su family, and that teleportation array or spacetime tunnel was very likely to lead to the heavenly domain of China where Sky Saint was. As for what happened to the ancestor of the Su family, Zhuo didn't know, but he knew that it definitely wouldn't be good. However, Zhuo felt a little helpless now. He knew very well that it would be a little difficult for him to leave the 6 Desires heavenly domain now. Now that he'd taken Desireless away, Palace Master Wujue had definitely sealed off the borders of the 6 Desires heavenly domain. Once he appeared at the borders of the 6 Desires heavenly domain, Palace Master Wujue would immediately know. At that time, he'd be exposed even faster. Second Elder, can the fragrance of this medicinal powder be concealed? Zhuo asked anxiously. Zhuo knew that as long as the fragrance was concealed, even if it was only temporary, it would buy him a lot of time. The second elder looked at the brazier behind Zhuo and said, "The alchemy fire can devour everything related to elixirs. As long as the alchemy fire devours the medicinal powder, not only the fragrance, but the entire medicinal powder will be completely destroyed by the alchemy fire." Upon hearing this, Zhuowen's eyes lit up. He hurriedly asked the black-robed Zhuo to command the alchemy fire to devour all the medicinal powder in the jade box. However, when the alchemy fire devoured the medicinal powder on Desireless body, Zhuo only allowed the alchemy fire to eliminate the fragrance of the medicinal powder. He didn't allow the alchemy fire to devour the medicinal powder. Desireless body still had the imprint left behind by Palace Master Wujue. If this imprint wasn't covered by the medicinal powder, it would be very easy for Palace Master Wujue to discover it again. After doing all this, Zhuowen discovered that the jade box containing the medicinal powder was actually intact. His gaze turned cold as he ordered the black-robed Zhuowen to place the jade box on an ownerless flying divine tool. Then, he let the flying divine tool fly into the depths of the starry sky. Old Lord Tusida always did things flawlessly. Therefore, Zhuowen didn't dare to leave any of this old man's things behind. Who knew if this old man had done something to the jade box? After doing all this, Zhuowen finally let out a sigh of relief. At least, the crisis in front of him had been temporarily resolved. However, he also knew that with the power of the Six Desires' heavenly domain, they would eventually find him. As long as he didn't leave the Six Desires' heavenly domain, there was a possibility that he would be found. Therefore, he had to first go to the Su family to take a look. If the Su family really had a way to leave the Six Desires' heavenly domain, even if it wasn't a good place, he would still give it a try. Second Elder, I have to leave the Pill Pagoda. Otherwise, it will be very easy for me to implicate the Pill Pagoda. Goodbye. Zhuowen cupped his fists towards the Second Elder. Then, he withdrew his doppelganger and alchemy fire. As for the Pill Emperor Turtle, it very consciously jumped onto Zhuowen's shoulder. The Second Elder looked at the departing Zhuowen and whispered, I hope that Zhuo Xiaoyu can avoid this calamity. When he finally reaches the realm of three extremes, I hope that he can keep his promise and return the alchemy fire to the Pill Pagoda. After leaving the Pill Pagoda, Zhuowen immediately activated the space-time wheel and left the Pill Furnace star field. Chapter 2460. Su Qi's younger sister Wen Zhuowen left the Pill Furnace star zone and headed to the Su family. Palace Master Wujue sent off Old Lord Tusida and Yema Zi with a gloomy face in the Six Desires Palace's plaza. Old Lord Tusida and Yema Zi stayed in the Six Desires Palace for 5 days and finally negotiated with Palace Master Wujue. Palace Master Wujue also used these 5 days to order the people of the Six Desires Palace to completely seal off the borders of the Six Desires' heavenly domain. The defenses of the Six Desires' heavenly domain's borders were extremely tight and strict. They were much stronger than the Great Brahma heavenly domain. Moreover, there were several ancient teleportation arrays at the border. Once Zhuowen appeared at the border, Palace Master Wujue could teleport over immediately and capture Zhuowen. After the transaction with Old Lord Tusida, Palace Master Wujue naturally knew that the culprit who took Desireless away was actually Longwen, who was brought over by Palace Master Jingyun. Jingyun, this is all because of your foolishness. After Old Lord Tusida and Yema Zi left, Palace Master Wujue impolitely glared at Palace Master Jingyun, who had her head lowered. Seeing that the latter only lowered her head and didn't say anything, Palace Master Wujue didn't say anything either. All of you stay in the Six Desires Palace. I'll chase after that arrogant brat. If news comes from the borders, immediately teleport over and intercept that brat. Palace Master Wujue casually instructed before turning into a stream of light and leaving the Six Desires star zone. Several days later, Palace Master Wujue landed in a barren pile of meteorites. According to Old Lord Tusida's method, she followed the fragrance and found this place. After shuttling through the pile of meteorites for a while, Palace Master Wujue immediately discovered a flying-type divine tool not far ahead. At this moment, the flying-type divine tool was completely dim. Clearly, it had exhausted all its energy and was stranded in the pile of meteorite. Found it! The moment Palace Master Wujue saw the flying-type divine tool, her beautiful eyes revealed a pleasantly surprised expression. Palace Master Wujue arrived at the flying-type divine tool and blasted it away. Then, before she could even react, the flying-type divine tool actually self-destructed. Rumble! The terrifying explosive energy was the first to envelop Palace Master Wu Ju. Palace Master Wu Jue rushed out of the explosion. Although she was not injured, her clothes were damaged by the explosion. She looked tattered and battered. Bastard! Palace Master Wu Jue roared furiously. She knew that she had been tricked. Her first reaction was that old Lord Tusida had tricked her. However, she quickly realized that something was amiss. This flying divine artifact was of an extremely low level. There was no way an expert like old Lord Tusida would be able to carry such a low-level flying divine artifact. A mere 8 steps void sky ant dares to toy with this palace master? If this palace master finds you, I'll definitely make you beg for death. Palace Master Wujue quickly thought of the dragon rune. She knew that this cunning fella must have noticed that something was wrong, so he replaced the mark left by old Lord Tusida. Now, Palace Master Wujue felt somewhat helpless. She could not sense the mark on Desireless' body at all. Clearly, it was still isolated. Trying to find dragon rune now was undoubtedly like trying to find a needle in a haystack. However, Palace Master Wujue was not worried. With the enormous power of the Six Desires Palace, it was actually not difficult to find dragon rune. As long as the borders of the Six Desires heavenly domain were sealed, Zhuowen would be found in the Six Desires heavenly domain. Thinking of this, Palace Master Wujue decided to return to the Six Desires Palace first. She was prepared to issue a wanted order and use all the forces in the Six Desires heavenly domain to find dragon rune. In the extremely remote starry sky in the northern part of the Six Desires heavenly domain, there was not even a starfield here. There were only planets with thin energy. When Zhuowen saw such a remote place in the northern part of the Six Desires heavenly domain, he could not help but reveal a strange expression. He did not expect that there would be such a remote and backward place in the Six Desires heavenly domain. He knew very well that it was impossible for a void sky expert to exist in such a planet. According to the map that Su Qi had given him, the Su family was on one of these planets. This planet was called the Heavenly Spirit Planet. A stream of light swept out from a dim planet in front of him. Zhuowen immediately intercepted this stream of light. The person intercepted by Zhuowen was a rather innocent-looking woman. To Zhuowen's surprise, this woman's cultivation was only at the demigod realm. Of course, the reason this innocent-looking woman could cross the starry sky was because of the heavenly divine weapon under her feet. Otherwise, she would not have been able to leave the planet at all. At that moment, the innocent-looking woman was intercepted by Zhuowen. Her pretty face immediately revealed a shocked expression. She asked anxiously, "What are you doing? Why are you intercepting me?" When Zhuowen saw this innocent-looking woman, he could not help but be stunned. This woman in front of him was actually very similar to Su Qi, who had died back then. If he did not look carefully, Zhuowen would have thought that this woman was Su Qi. "Miss, what's the relationship between you and Su Qi?" Zhuowen suddenly asked. When the innocent-looking woman heard Su Qi's name, the anxiety on her pretty face could not help but disappear. She quickly said anxiously, "You've seen my sister. Do you know where she is?" Zhuowen thought to himself, as expected, this woman is really related to Su Qi and their sisters. However, what puzzled Zhuowen was that although Su Qi's cultivation was not high back then, she was at least a void sky cultivator. However, why was Su Qi's sister only a pitiful heaven god? Moreover, judging from the place where the Su family was located, there were probably not many true god cultivators, let alone void sky experts. With Su Qi's cultivation, she could completely change the declining Su family. What Zhuowen did not know was that when Su Qi eloped with Jiao Wendong, she had broken off relations with the Su family. At that time, Su Qi was only at the heavenly god realm. However, later on, Su Qi had trained outside for many years and obtained many opportunities. That was why her cultivation had finally advanced to the virtual sky world. Originally, after Su Qi left the river of spacetime quicksand, she had planned to return to the Su family. However, she did not expect that she would be betrayed by her lover, Jia Wendong, in the river of space-time quicksand and eventually die there. Just as Zhuowen was about to say that Su Qi had died, his eyes narrowed. He saw 2 more streams of light rushing over from the front, and their target was him. "Someone is chasing you?" Zhuowen asked. "Ah? Yes, the Du family is still chasing me. No, let's leave this place first. You can tell me about my sister later." The innocent-looking woman immediately grabbed Zhuowen's hand and was about to leave with Zhuowen when the 2 streams of light in front of them blocked their path. "Second miss of the Su family, do you think it's possible for you to leave just like that?" A teasing voice was heard. Zhuowen shook his head. This innocent-looking woman was really a little careless. Since she was running for her life, she could actually forget about this matter. If he had not reminded her, this innocent-looking woman would probably have only realized it after these 2 people caught up to her. The 2 people in front of her were middle-aged men. One of them had dark eyes and a sharp nose. He looked sinister, while the other was bald and strong, like an iron tower. The one who spoke just now was the man with the sharp nose. The innocent-looking woman's pretty face turned pale. She immediately pulled Zhuowen behind her and whispered to Zhuowen, "This has nothing to do with you. You'd better leave quickly. Don't worry about me." Zhuowen's eyes revealed a look of surprise. He had a good impression of the innocent-looking woman in his heart. Chapter 2461. Heavenly Spirit Star Friend, we are the retainers of the Ling family. Please leave quickly and don't meddle in other people's business. The hook-nosed man's gaze was sinister. He stared at Zhuowen, but he was somewhat wary. Although Zhuowen's aura was not obvious, and it seemed that his cultivation was not high, he was not a newborn calf. He could tell at a glance that the space-time wheel under Zhuowen's feet was extraordinary. To be able to use such an extraordinary flying divine tool, this person was definitely not simple. That was why the hook-nosed man did not immediately attack. Instead, he mentioned the Ling family behind him, and his tone was not that fierce. When the pure woman saw that the hook-nosed man was planning to let Zhuowen go, she could not help but let out a sigh of relief. She hurriedly said to Zhuowen, "This has nothing to do with you. You should leave quickly. Don't interfere in this matter." Zhuowen once again looked at this girl with a strange gaze. This pure girl's nerves were not ordinary. Even the hook-nosed man was able to discover his abnormality, but this girl's gaze revealed that Zhuowen's luck was not bad. Zhuowen no longer paid attention to the pure woman. Instead, he said indifferently to the 2 people in front of him, "This woman is the sister of a friend of mine. For my sake, the 2 of you should let her go." As soon as these words were said, the hook-nosed man and the bald man's eyes darkened. "You really don't want face. Since that's the case, don't blame us for being impolite." The hook-nosed man snorted coldly and gave the bald man a look. Then, the 2 of them turned into 2 streaks of light and attacked from 2 directions. On the other hand, the pure woman said somewhat anxiously, "Aya, run quickly. Both of them are heavenly god stage experts. You can't deal with them alone. Don't worry, although the Ling family is powerful, they don't dare to kill me. At least my life is not in danger." Zhuowen stood quietly on the spot. He didn't even move. He even smiled at the pure woman and said, "Your sister's name is Su Qi. I haven't asked for your name yet." Seeing that Zhuowen was indifferent, the pure woman immediately became anxious. Just as she was about to say something, she suddenly realized that something was wrong. Because according to the hook-nosed man and the bald man's speed, they should have already killed their way to Zhuowen. But now, not only was there no movement, there was not even the slightest movement. This was too strange. Then, the pure girl looked left and right. She realized that the hook-nosed man and the bald man had disappeared. It was as if they had evaporated into thin air. "Where is he? Why are those 2 fellows gone?" The pure girl scratched her head in confusion. "Maybe it was scared away by me?" Zhuowen smiled faintly. Actually, when he was talking to the pure girl just now, he casually blasted out 2 streams of god power and blasted the 2 of them into nothingness. With Zhuowen's current cultivation, dealing with 2 celestial gods was simply bullying the weak. Originally, Zhuowen wanted to let the 2 of them go. Unfortunately, the 2 of them really didn't understand the situation and still planned to attack him. Naturally, Zhuowen wouldn't be so kind as to stand still and let the 2 of them kill him. The pure girl frowned slightly, but she felt that something was strange. The hook-nosed man and the bald man had clearly planned to kill the white-clothed youth in front of them. Why did they run away in the blink of an eye? And there was no trace of them at all. Although she was very puzzled by the disappearance of the hook-nosed man and the bald man, the pure girl didn't care much. She had a careless personality to begin with. Since she couldn't figure something out, she would never think too much about it. I still don't know your name, big brother. And are you really my sister's friend? Where is my sister? In the face of the pure girl's barrage of questions, Zhuowen smiled and said, I'm Zhuowen. I met my sister, Su Qi, by chance in the river of spacetime quicksand. Zhuowen didn't intend to tell her about Su Qi's death. He knew that if he said it now, the pure girl in front of him might change her expression. His goal this time was the Su family. It wasn't easy to meet someone from the Su family, so he naturally wanted her to lead him to the Su family. If she hated him because of Su Qi's death, then the gains wouldn't make up for the losses. I'm Su Su. Since you're my sister's friend, then you're my friend. By the way, you haven't told me where my sister is yet. Su Su said anxiously. Su Su's cultivation wasn't high, and she lived in such a remote place. She had never heard of the famous river of spacetime quicksand, so she wasn't surprised when she heard that Zhuowen had met Su Qi in the river of spacetime quicksand. Zhuowen said apologetically, Miss Su Qi and I parted ways after leaving the river of spacetime quicksand. As for where she is now, I'm not too sure. Perhaps she'll come back in the future. Hearing this, Su Su's eyes showed disappointment, but she was clearly an optimist. She said with a smile, although my sister had a conflict with our family many years ago, I know that she has always been concerned about the Su family. I believe that she will definitely change her mind and come back in the future. Looking at Su Su's hopeful face, Zhuowen sighed in his heart. He knew that Su Qi would never come back, but he wouldn't say this, at least not for now. Big brother Zhuowen, will you come back to the Su family with me? Su Su looked at him and asked. Zhuowen's expression brightened. Naturally, he quickly agreed. His goal this time was the Su family. Seeing that Zhuowen had agreed, Su Su was naturally very happy. The 2 of them chatted happily on their way back to Heavenly Spirit Planet. Zhuowen also realized that Su Su was indeed very simple. Clearly, she was a girl who had never experienced great storms. During the conversation, Zhuowen also roughly understood the distribution of forces on Heavenly Spirit Planet. In this remote area in the north, there weren't even any galaxies, let alone star fields. The only things that existed were these scattered planets. Of course, the laws of these planets were much better than the Heavenly Armor Planet, so they could nurture heavenly god-level experts. Some powerful planets could even nurture true god-level experts. There were only 2 true god-level experts on Heavenly Spirit Planet. One of them was the patriarch of the Ling family, and the other was the patriarch of the Su family. The Ling family and the Su family were considered the 2 most powerful forces on Heavenly Spirit Planet. As the saying goes, where there are people, there will be conflict. Moreover, there can't be 2 tigers on one mountain. The Ling family and the Su family had always been at odds with each other, and there was always friction on Heavenly Spirit Planet. However, it was usually only a small-scale conflict. This time, however, the Ling family had gone crazy. They actually openly challenged the Su family and threatened to kick the Su family out of Heavenly Spirit Planet. The Su family naturally refused, so the 2 families immediately clashed and started a large-scale battle. There were countless casualties. Chapter 2462. Blood Fiend Array Su was the second miss of the Su clan. Now that the Su clan was in imminent danger, Su was ambushed by the Ling clan during a battle. All the people she brought were annihilated, and even she was almost captured. If it wasn't for the Su clan's old ancestor giving her a flying divine tool, Su would have become a prisoner of the Ling clan. Of course, Su could have returned to the Su family. Unfortunately, 2 divine realm experts from the Ling family chased after her. In the end, Su had no choice but to leave Heavenly Spirit Planet. Su also knew that once she left Heavenly Spirit Planet, it would be difficult to return. Therefore, she planned to find her sister, Su-Chi. Su-Chi was the most talented genius of the Su family. The Su family's patriarch knew that after so many years, Su-Chi's cultivation would at least be at the true God realm. She might even break through the true God realm and reach the virtual sky realm. As long as he could find Su-Chi, the Su family's revenge would naturally be avenged. Speaking of the Su family, Su frowned. She sighed and said, "The patriarch's strength is actually more powerful than the patriarch of the Ling family." Unfortunately, the patriarch of the Ling family got that consumable divine weapon from somewhere and actually injured our patriarch. Now, the Ling family is waiting for our patriarch to fall. Then, they will launch an all-out attack and completely occupy our Su family. Speaking of this, Su felt helpless. At the same time, she looked at Zhuowen apologetically and said, "Big brother Zhuo, you're a guest. It's only right to invite you to the Su family." However, the Su family's situation is not optimistic. If Big brother Zhuo feels that it's inappropriate, you don't have to go back with me. Zhuowen smiled and said, "What's inappropriate? Moreover, I'm quite knowledgeable about pills. Perhaps if you bring me back, I can help your patriarch take a look." Su was a simple person. Seeing that Zhuowen knew about medicine, she actually believed him immediately. However, Zhuowen secretly shook his head. Su, this little girl, was not scheming. If he had any evil intentions, this girl would definitely die. After a while, the 2 of them went deep into Heavenly Spirit Planet. As soon as Zhuowen entered Heavenly Spirit Planet, he shook his head. The spirit energy on this planet was really lacking. Although it was much better than on Heavenly Armor Planet, Zhuowen was no longer the young boy who had just left Heavenly Armor Planet. After so many years of cultivation, he had been to the Taiching Immortal Realm, the Brahma Heaven Palace, and the 6 Desires Palace. Which one of them wasn't a top-notch place in the Heaven Domain? He had even been to many dangerous and even treasured places. Even the planets in the Ziwei galaxy that Zhuowen had taken into Devour's body were much more intelligent than this heavenly spirit star. It could be seen how scarce the earth and heaven energy in this star was. However, it was precisely because of the scarcity and remoteness of this place that Zhuowen chose to come here. Otherwise, the chances of being discovered by the 6 Desires Palace would be too high if he went to those bustling galaxies and star regions. Moreover, most of the areas on Heavenly Spirit Planet were ruins left behind by battles. Clearly, this planet was not peaceful. When Zhuowen's gaze fell on the broken walls left behind by the war, he suddenly exclaimed in surprise, arousing Su's suspicion. "Brother Zhuo, what's wrong with you? Is there something strange?" Su asked doubtfully. Zhuowen shook his head and said with a smile, "No, let's continue moving forward." Hearing this, Su didn't doubt him and continued to lead the way. However, what she didn't see was that after she turned around, Zhuowen's eyes suddenly became gloomy. Just now, Zhuowen's divine sense casually swept across those battlefields and immediately found some clues. Later, he used his divine sense to investigate further and found that there was a man-made array under each battlefield. Zhuowen had never arranged this array before, but he had heard of it before. It was called the Blood Evil Array. The Blood Evil Array was a kind of array that absorbed the blood chi of the human body and gathered it in the array to transform it into a huge amount of cultivation energy. The advantage of this array was that it could make the cultivation speed of the cultivator extremely fast. After all, the blood chi was the energy of the human body, so the cultivator didn't need to convert it at all and could directly absorb it. However, the reason why the blood evil array was so insidious was that this blood evil array would not only absorb the blood chi of cultivators, but also powerless mortals. It was very common for cultivators to kill each other, but to kill innocent mortals was a practice that went against the laws of nature. Even if this kind of cultivator cultivated very quickly, the end result was basically very miserable. According to Zhuowen's knowledge, most of the people who used the blood evil array were evil cultivators. They were disgusting people who hoped to use improper methods to quickly improve their cultivation. Thinking of this, Zhuowen's heart was filled with murderous intent. If it was possible, he would go back and find that evil cultivator and kill him now. However, when his divine sense went deep into the battlefields, he only found the blood evil array and didn't find the evil cultivator. Since he was determined to kill that evil cultivator, Zhuowen naturally didn't want to act rashly and alert the enemy. Otherwise, that evil cultivator would definitely escape. Moreover, Zhuowen faintly felt that this battle on Heavenly Spirit Star was very likely related to that evil cultivator. Miss Su Su, was this battle started by the Ling family? Zhuowen asked casually. Su Su was leading the way in front. When she heard Zhuowen's question, she nodded and said, "Yes, I don't know what's wrong with that Ling family. They said that they want to chase our Su family out of Heavenly Spirit Star, and even instigated all the cultivators on Heavenly Spirit Star. Even many innocent mortals were involved. The battle between cultivators has nothing to do with mortals, but that Ling family." Speaking of this, Su Su's beautiful eyes revealed a look of resentment. It was obvious that she deeply hated the Ling family. Zhuowen nodded. He was now basically certain that the Ling family should be related to that evil cultivator. Otherwise, it wouldn't be so coincidental. Soon, the two of them arrived at Suzhou City, where the Su family was located. Suzhou City's defense was quite strong. There were powerful restrictions all around, emitting bursts of flowing light. However, the formations and restrictions in Suzhou were only a threat to cultivators below the Void Sky stage. They were not worth mentioning for Void Sky cultivators. This was because the restrictions on Suzhou City were at most a level 1 array. Even a virtual sky realm cultivator might not necessarily be able to defend against it. Big Brother Zhua, this level 1 array was purchased by our Su family's ancestor from the Gulan Galaxy. I heard that the Gulan Galaxy is one of the most powerful galaxies in the entire Six Desires heavenly realm. Speaking of Suzhou City's level 1 array, Su Su's beautiful face revealed a trace of pride. She couldn't help but raise her head and puff out her chest as she introduced it to Zhuowen. Zhuowen was a little speechless. However, this level 1 array was indeed enough on Heavenly Spirit Star. True God cultivators couldn't break this array at all. After Su Su took out her identity token, she brought Zhuowen into Suzhou City smoothly. Suzhou City was quite calm at this moment. The cultivators passing by all looked hurried and worried. Sigh. It's all because of the war. Chapter 2463. Su family's old ancestor, young lady Su Su, you're all right. I was so worried. Suddenly, an excited voice came from nearby. Then, a middle-aged man walked over with a group of soldiers and stopped in front of Su Su. His face was filled with excitement. Uncle Xiao, I thought I would never see you again. Su Su was pleasantly surprised. She couldn't help but hold the middle-aged man's hands. There was even a trace of mist in her eyes. Zhuowen silently looked at the middle-aged man in front of him and frowned. The man's words just now were too abrupt. His tone was as if he already knew something would happen to Su Su. Previously, Su Su could be said to have told him everything. She even told him about being chased. It was said that she was ambushed by the enemy. In the end, she relied on the flying divine tool given to her by the Su family's old ancestor to escape. Su Su seemed to have only told him about this. As for this middle-aged man, he shouldn't have known. However, when the middle-aged man saw that Su Su was back, his first sentence was a little strange. This made Zhuowen suspicious. Of course, Su Su didn't notice the problem in the middle-aged man's words. At this moment, she was reminiscing with the middle-aged man. Young master, thank you for saving young lady Su Su. I am Su Xiu, the Su family's head steward. You are young lady Su Su's savior. The Su family owes you a debt of gratitude. Please accept my bow. The middle-aged man came in front of Zhuowen. His face was filled with gratitude, and he was about to bow to Zhuowen. Zhuowen stood in the same place and didn't move. He didn't stop the middle-aged man. The middle-aged man's originally bowed body stiffened. His eyes revealed a bone-chilling coldness. However, since Zhuowen didn't show any courtesy, he could only take the opportunity to bow deeply to Zhuowen. So, it's the steward of the Su family. You're too polite. Actually, I didn't help much. The two people who were chasing after us suddenly left for some reason. So, I can only say that Miss Su Su and I are lucky. Zhuowen smiled. The middle-aged man stood up. His expression was not very good, but he still smiled and said, No matter what, young Master Zhuo, you saved our young lady's life. Now, please follow this old man back to the Su family. Also, young lady, I have already informed the patriarch that you have returned. He said that he wants to see you. The patriarch is awake. That's great. Big brother Zhuo, come with us. Su Su exclaimed in surprise. However, the middle-aged man stopped the two of them. Shortly after, the middle-aged man looked at Su Su apologetically and said, Miss, after all, this person isn't from our Su family. Moreover, the ancestor only summoned you. Let him follow. The middle-aged man didn't finish his words, but a troubled expression appeared on his face. Su Su, on the other hand, said carelessly, Uncle Xiu, don't worry. Big brother Zhuo isn't an outsider. He's friends with my sister. Hasn't the ancestor always wanted to know my sister's whereabouts? Now that big brother Zhuo has brought it over, he will definitely be happy. The middle-aged man's gaze froze. Shortly after, he sized up Zhuowen. However, Zhuowen could sense the coldness in the middle-aged man's gaze. He couldn't help but sneer in his heart. So you're the young lady's friend. Young master, it's not that this old man doesn't believe you, but the young lady has left the Su family for a long time. How can you prove that you're the young lady's friend? The middle-aged man's tone was cold. Su Su's beautiful eyes froze. She said with some displeasure, Uncle Xiu, big brother Zhuo is my savior. It's not good for you to doubt him like this. Miss, now is the time when the Su family and the Ling family are at war. Some people have unknown origins. They might be from the Ling family, so it's best for you to be vigilant, the middle-aged man continued. Su Su's expression turned ugly. She coldly snorted and said, Uncle Xiu, thank you for your reminder. I'll go see the patriarch now. After saying that, Su Su brought Zhuowen and walked past the middle-aged man. The middle-aged man didn't stop them. Instead, he turned to look at Zhuowen's back. His eyes revealed a contemplative look. Big brother Zhuo, I'm sorry. Uncle Xiu is a cautious person, so he might have said something inappropriate just now. I hope you don't take it to heart. Su Su apologized to Zhuowen. It's fine. My origins are indeed unknown. Your Uncle Xiu is right. But why does Miss Su Su believe me so much? Zhuowen looked at Su Su in surprise. Because I feel that you're not a bad person, so you're definitely not a bad person, Su Su said with a smile. Hearing such an answer, Zhuowen was speechless. After entering the Su family's mansion, because of Su Su, the two of them were naturally unimpeded. They went straight to the Su family's patriarch's pavilion. The Su family's patriarch's pavilion was heavily guarded. There were even other restrictions outside the pavilion. It could be said that it was airtight. Of course, to Zhuowen, these restrictions were no different than nothing. "Second miss, this person can't go in." The guard stopped Zhuowen and looked at Su Su as he said, "He's my savior and my sister's friend. The patriarch definitely wants to see him. If you don't inform him, how do you know the patriarch won't let him in?" Su Su said with a glare. When the guard seemed to be saying something, an old voice came from the pavilion, "Let them in." The guard cupped his hands towards the pavilion and no longer stopped Zhuowen. Then, the two of them entered the depths of the pavilion. The pavilion's decoration was extremely simple. Other than a wooden bed, there was a wooden table and a few stools. Apart from that, there was nothing else in the pavilion. On the wooden bed, an old man with a head full of silver hair sat cross-legged. His face was pale and his breathing was chaotic. After Su Su and Zhuowen entered, the old man opened his eyes. He looked at Su Su kindly and said, "Su, you scared me to death. When you activated the flying divine artifact, I thought you were in some kind of life and death crisis." Su Su came to the bedside and naturally hugged one of the old man's arms. She said coquettishly, "Patriarch, it's all thanks to my luck. Of course, there's also Brother Zhuo's help." As she spoke, Su Su began to talk about what happened when they were running for their lives. The old man listened very carefully. "Friend, thank you for saving Su." The old man looked at Zhuowen with a kind smile, but soon he looked straight at Zhuowen with a serious expression. Then, he said to Su Su, "Su, go out for a moment. I have something to say to this little friend." Su Su pouted and said, "What is it that you need to hide from me?" The old man stroked Su Su's hair and said with a smile, "Su, be good. I really have something important to say to this little friend. Don't be willful, okay?" Although Su Su was very unwilling, she didn't want to disobey the patriarch's order. She could only reluctantly nod and leave the pavilion. In the empty pavilion, only the old man and Zhuowen were left. "Purple jade is in your hands. What did you do to Qi?" The old man's eyes were filled with killing intent as he looked at Zhuowen. Chapter 2464. The Su family's forbidden area. "You're talking about this purple jade, right?" Zhuowen took out the purple jade from his spirit ring and tossed it to the old man on the bed. The old man took the purple jade and examined it. His eyes were filled with excitement as he raised his head to look at the young man in white in front of him in confusion. Obviously, he could not understand why the young man in white would give the purple jade to him so easily. However, his heart calmed down a lot. He knew that the young man in white in front of him had no ill intentions. "The purple jade was given to me by Miss Su Qi before she died." Before Zhuowen could finish speaking, the old man's entire body trembled, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. His face was as pale as snow as he trembled and said, "What did you say? Qi, she died?" Zhuowen came to the old man's side, took out a divine pill, and fed it to the old man. The old man's face, which was originally pale, suddenly became much rosier. The old man was shocked by the effects of this divine pill. He could clearly feel that the injuries in his body had healed by more than half in an instant. Moreover, the effects of the divine pill were extremely powerful and had not been completely absorbed by him. If he absorbed all of these medicinal effects, his injuries would probably be completely healed. Although the old man was shocked by the divine pill that Zhuowen had given him, he did not think too much about it. His main concern now was Su Qi's death. "Young friend, why did Su Qi die? How did she die?" The old man grabbed Zhuowen's arms excitedly. If he had been wary of Zhuowen at the beginning, he was no longer wary of him. He knew that if the young man in front of him wanted to harm him, he would not have taken out such a precious divine pill to heal his injuries. Zhuowen sighed softly and told the old man the details of Su Qi's death. At the same time, he took out the image of the crystal ball that he had recorded in the quicksand river in time and space and gave it to the old man. After the old man finished watching the image in the crystal ball, his right hand trembled and his eyes were filled with guilt and anger. "This Jia Wendong is really a beast. Back then, Su Qi left the Su family for him. I thought that Jiao Wendong would treat Qi'er well, but I didn't expect him to be a wolf in human skin, the old man said, trembling. Don't worry, old sir. I've already killed Jiao Wendong. I've also avenged Miss Su Qi. These are Miss Su Qi's ashes. Her last wish was for her ashes to return to her roots. Zhuowen sighed softly. He took out an urn of ashes and handed it to the old man. The old man trembled as he received the urn. He struggled to get up and kneeled on the ground with a plop. He said gratefully to Zhuowen, Senior, thank you for everything you've done for Qi'er. As long as Senior has any orders, I, Su Yi, will do it for Senior even if I have to sacrifice myself. Based on the image in the crystal ball, Su Yi naturally knew that Su Qi was already a void sky cultivator, and that Jiao Wendong's cultivation level was even higher than Su Qi's. Previously, Zhuowen had said that he had already killed Jiao Wendong. It was obvious that this ordinary-looking white-clothed young man was definitely a void sky cultivator who was stronger than Jiao Wendong. Zhuowen helped Su Yi up and said with a smile, Old sir, don't call me senior. My name is Zhuowen. You can call me Brother Zhua. When Su Yi heard Zhuowen say this, he could only nod and change his way of addressing him. However, his expression and attitude were still respectful and cautious. Although Zhuowen looked very kind, Su Yi knew that this young man before him was extremely powerful. He was a legendary void sky cultivator, so he did not dare to treat him carelessly. After all, there were only two true gods on Heavenly Spirit Planet, and it was even more impossible for them to have a void sky cultivator. Su Yi naturally had to be cautious when facing a void sky cultivator. Zhuowen did not pay attention to Su Ye's careful thoughts. Instead, he smiled faintly and said, Old Sir Su, Miss Su Qi once told me that your Su family's ancestor obtained this purple jade and comprehended the power of Tao intent? Su Ye's pupils constricted, and he sighed softly. Brother Zhua, our ancestor indeed comprehended the power of Tao intent because he obtained this purple jade. However, he also mysteriously disappeared because of the power of Tao intent. Not only my ancestor, but the following generations of brilliant successors of the Su family also mysteriously disappeared because they comprehended the power of Tao intent in the purple jade. It is precisely because of the disappearance of these Su family prodigies that our Su family has fallen into such dire straits, Zhuowen nodded. He had already heard about the disappearance of the Su family's powerhouses from Su Qi. However, he still wanted to ask how these powerhouses disappeared. Your Su family's ancestor shouldn't have disappeared for no reason. Do you know where he went missing? Zhuowen asked with interest. Su Ye's expression froze, and he immediately said with some hesitation, Brother Zhua, it's not that I don't want to tell you, but this place is the Su family's forbidden area. It's also a cursed place. If you go in, I'm afraid you'll be implicated, so, before Su Yi could finish speaking, he was interrupted by Zhuowen. Old Sir Su, the reason I came to the Su family this time is because of this purple jade. Zhuowen stopped beating around the bush with Su Yi and immediately revealed his purpose this time. He did not have much time now. Although the Heavenly Spirit Planet was remote enough, he was still a little afraid that the Six Desires Palace's forces would extend here. If he still could not leave the Six Desires' heavenly domain by then, he would most likely die. Although Zhuowen had never entered the Su family's forbidden area, he had a premonition that there was definitely something like a teleportation array in this forbidden area. Although the other end of the teleportation array might be a land of evil, this was Zhuowen's only way out. Of course, he would only use this method when he had no other choice. He would only use it when he was at his wits' end. Now, he mainly wanted to find out the ins and outs of the Su family's Tao intent. Perhaps he might be able to gain something. Su Yi felt the unyielding tone in Zhuowen's tone, and his eyes flickered. Although he was a little hesitant, he still sighed in the end and said, Brother Zhua, if you insist on taking a look, I'll take you there. However, if anything happens, I won't be responsible. Old Sir Su, don't worry. Even if something happens, I won't implicate your Su family. Zhuowen promised. Su Yi sighed softly. What he was most afraid of was that if Zhuowen suffered a great loss in the forbidden area and vented his anger on the Su family, then their Su family would really be finished. Knock, knock, knock. Someone suddenly knocked on the door urgently. Su Yi frowned and said, "What's the matter?" A rather panicked voice came from outside. Patriarch, the Ling family's patriarch, has brought the Ling family's cultivator army to Suzhou City. Su Ye's expression changed slightly, and then he looked at Zhuowen with some hesitation. Zhuowen smiled and said, "Old Sir Su, give me the address of the forbidden area. If you have something to do, you can go ahead first." Chapter 2465. Ling Tianzong. Su Yi knew very well that if Zhuowen wanted to help the Su family, the Ling family could be destroyed with a flip of his hand. However, judging from Zhuowen's tone, it was clear that he did not want to interfere in the conflict between the two families. Naturally, Su Yi did not dare to rashly bring it up. Moreover, Su Yi also discovered that ever since he took the divine elixir Zhuowen gave him, not only had his injuries completely healed, but his divine power also seemed to be much stronger than before. Although he did not know what kind of divine elixir it was, he knew that it must be extremely valuable. At the very least, it was impossible for him to obtain such a divine elixir at his current level. Su Yi took out a jade slip and handed it to Zhuowen, saying, Brother Zhua, the location of the forbidden area is not on Heavenly Spirit Planet. This place is extremely hidden, and no one in the Su family knows about it except for me. Zhuowen took the jade slip and cupped his fists, saying, Thank you, Elder Su. Su Yi hurriedly waved his hand and cupped his hands, saying, Brother Zhua, I'll take my leave first. I wish you all the best. After saying that, Su Yi hurriedly left the room. After Su Yi left, Su entered the room and said to Zhuowen seriously, Brother Zhuowen, do you want to come with me to the city wall of Suzhou City? Those bastards from the Ling family are attacking. Zhuowen shook his head and smiled, saying, No, you can go and take a look yourself. I still have some things to take care of. Su pouted. Although she was a little unhappy with Zhuowen's rejection, she did not pester Zhuowen to go. Instead, she gave a few instructions to Zhuowen and left the room. Soon, all the guards in the loft where Su Yi was were all gone. Obviously, they had all been taken away by Su Yi. Zhuowen stood in the courtyard and took out the jade slip. After scanning it with his divine sense, his eyes revealed a look of surprise. This was because the location of the forbidden area recorded in the jade slip was even more remote than Heavenly Spirit Planet. It was located in the depths of a dead star in the northernmost part of the Six Desires heavenly domain. Thinking of this, Zhuowen disappeared and left Heavenly Spirit Star. Given Zhuowen's present cultivation, it was as if the restrictions of Suzhou did not exist in his eyes. However, before Zhuowen left, he left his doppelganger in Suzhou. He suspected that the sorcerer who had set up the blood evil matrix had some connection to the Ling family. If that sorcerer had made a move, Suzhou would definitely have been lost. Thus, he had left his doppelganger behind just in case. On the vast land in front of Suzhou, a dense army of cultivators floated in the air and quickly approached Suzhou. At the very front of this army of cultivators, there was an extremely luxurious flying ship leading the way. When the cultivator army saw the ship, they were all in awe. They knew that the person living in the ship was their ancestor, Ling Tianzong. 10 li away from Suzhou, the cultivator army stopped. A blue-robed old man slowly walked out of the cabin of the luxurious spaceship in front of the army. The blue-robed old man's gaze was as sharp as a sword. He looked indifferently at the restrictive formation in front of Suzhou and sneered, Old bastard Su, are you dead yet? If not, then don't be a coward. Come out and fight me. It's not good for the great ancestor of the Su family to be a coward. When Ling Tianzong said this, The cultivator army behind him roared with laughter. All sorts of obscenities were spewed out, degrading Su Yi. Many of the Su family members on the city walls were furious. Some of the younger ones couldn't hold it in and wanted to charge out and attack. However, these young and impulsive Su family members were all stopped by Su Yi. Su Yi stood on the city wall and looked at Ling Tianzong emotionlessly. Ling Tianzong, do you dare to fight me one-on-one? Ling Tianzong looked at Su Yi and frowned. He clearly remembered that Su Yi had been heavily injured by the divine weapon he had obtained from the sorcerer. At that time, Su Yi's injuries were extremely severe. If he didn't have any divine pills or miraculous medicine, she would be waiting for death. According to Ling Tianzong's prediction, Su Yi shouldn't be able to hold on much longer. But now, Su Yi appeared in front of him without any injuries. Ling Tianzong would be lying if he said he wasn't shocked. Su Yi also saw the shock in Ling Tianzong's eyes. She was even more grateful to Zhuowen. Now, not only was her injuries completely healed, but her cultivation had also improved under the effects of the medicine. Ling Tianzong's cultivation was originally weaker than Su Yi's. Last time, he relied on a powerful consumable divine weapon to heavily injure her. This time, Su Yi was confident that even if Ling Tianzong still had that divine weapon, even if he wasn't a match for her, he wouldn't be heavily injured again. Once Ling Tianzong used up that consumable divine weapon, it would be time for her to counterattack. Why wouldn't I dare? Su Yi, you old bastard, come out and fight me! Ling Tianzong snorted and jumped out of the flying ship. He hovered in front of Suzhou City, causing the cultivators of the Ling family to cheer. Su Yi took a step forward. He clenched his hand and took out an extremely thick and long black spear. His entire body shot forward and charged towards Ling Tianzong. Ling Tianzong also immediately took out his natal divine weapon. His divine weapon was a blue broadsword. The blade was 5 feet long and looked extremely exaggerated. Bang! 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 In just an instant, Su Yi and Ling Tianzong were engaged in a fierce battle. Terrifying energy flew everywhere. In Suzhou City, Su Su looked at the two people fighting nervously. Master Su Yi's injuries have healed? Su Xiu walked to Su Su's side and asked in surprise. Su Su said proudly, Uncle Xiu, you misjudged. Ever since the ancestor came into contact with Brother Zhuo, her injuries have healed. You didn't believe Brother Zhuo before, but now you should believe him, right? Su Xiu's eyes became serious. He said in a deep voice, that Zhuowen's medical skills are so brilliant. I have to admit it. Oh right, why don't I see Zhuowen? Su Su said casually. Brother Zhuo said he had something to take care of. He shouldn't be here. He should still be in the Su family mansion. Then, Su Su suddenly looked in front of her in surprise and said, Ling Tianzong, that old guy, lost. How useless. The ancestor is indeed the best. Su Xiu looked up and saw Ling Tianzong flying backwards while vomiting blood. Su Yi only grunted and took a few steps back. Moreover, the moment Su Yi stopped, her right foot stepped on the air and rushed forward again, catching up with Ling Tianzong who was flying backward. Ling Tianzong's face was ugly. He realized that Su Yi's strength was even stronger than before. Bang! Ling Tianzong barely blocked Su Yi's pursuit. Then, he was blasted down from the sky by a powerful force and landed heavily on the soft soil. Su Yi floated in the air and looked down at Ling Tianzong who was in a sorry state. She said coldly, other than relying on external objects, you are completely useless. Today I will kill you. Ling Tianzong's face was gloomy. He sneered, You don't dare to kill me. If you dare to kill me, your granddaughter, Su Su, will die. Su Yi sneered, You're about to die. What nonsense are you spouting? Do you think I will believe your nonsense? Chapter 2466. Extinguished star. Su Yi subconsciously turned his head. Immediately after, a strong wind blew over and heavily smashed into his chest. Su Yi spat out a mouthful of blood and retreated several hundred meters. Only then did he realize that the person who had ambushed him was actually someone he was familiar with. "It's you, Su Xiu?" Su Yi looked at Su Xiu in disbelief. At this moment, Su Xiu was holding Su Su with his right hand and had an evil smile on his face. "My lord!" Ling Tianzong had already climbed up and hurriedly cupped his hands towards Su Xiu. His eyes were filled with respect. Su Yi looked at Ling Tianzong's performance and couldn't help but frown. He really couldn't understand why Su Xiu would do this. Moreover, the aura that Su Xiu was emitting gave him a strong sense of threat. He had never felt this kind of threat before. It was a kind of despair threat. Su Yi knew that this kind of feeling could only be felt when facing a terrifyingly powerful cultivator. Obviously, Su Xiu was very powerful. "Su Yi, you don't have to think too much. The real Su Xiu is already dead." Su Xiu's mouth was filled with a mocking smile. He didn't mind telling the truth at all. "Who are you?" Su Ye's eyes were dark. He didn't expect that the Su Xiu he had always trusted was actually not the real Su Xiu. Moreover, the real Su Xiu was already dead. "Who I am is not important. What I want to ask you now is, what did Zhuo Wen give you to eat? It actually allowed you to recover from your injuries in such a short period of time. Even your strength has become much stronger than before," Su Xiu said indifferently. Su Yi clenched his fist. He felt extremely sullen, but there was nothing he could do. His intuition told him that Su Xiu was very terrifying. "You're not going to tell me? Then you don't care about Su Su's life?" Su Xiu grabbed Su Su's hair and revealed Su Su's tear-stained face. "It's an elixir. I've never seen it before. There are 3 golden lines on the surface of the elixir. It looks like the claws of a golden crow," Su Yi said in a deep voice. "3-legged golden crow elixir?" Su Xiu was pleasantly surprised. He knew that this was a level 3 divine pill, and its value was comparable to an ordinary level 4 divine pill. He never thought that the ordinary Zhuowen would have such a precious divine pill on him. Jie, that Zhuowen is really rich. He casually took out a level 3 divine pill to heal you. However, I'm going to take his life. I'll also take all the treasures on his body." Su Xiu chuckled and formed a seal with his hands. Immediately, a streak of bloody light shot out from his seal and landed on the surface of Suzhou's seal. Su Yi, on the other hand, was shocked. He naturally knew about level 3 divine pills. These divine pills were luxurious medicinal pills that only Void Sky cultivators possessed. He didn't expect that Zhuowen would actually give him such a precious divine pill to heal his injuries. However, when he recalled that Zhuowen was also a Void Sky cultivator, he felt a lot more at ease. However, based on Su Xiu's aura, he was probably also a Void Sky cultivator. Su Yi wasn't sure if Zhuowen would be a match for Su Xiu. However, Su Yi soon realized that something was wrong. He suddenly looked towards Suzhou City and discovered that the surface of Suzhou's seal had turned into a blood-red barrier. Inside the blood-red barrier, the Su family disciples and mortals in Suzhou City were surrounded by a large amount of death qi. Their essence qi was absorbed by the blood-red barrier, turning them into dried corpses. You set up a formation in Suzhou City a long time ago. Su Yi was so angry that he spat out a mouthful of blood. He was furious as he watched the Su family disciples die one by one. Boom! However, not long after the blood-red barrier appeared, countless cracks appeared on its surface as if it had been shattered by a terrifying force. The smile at the corners of Su Xiu's mouth immediately froze. Shortly after, he abruptly looked towards Suzhou City. He discovered a youth in fluttering black clothes floating above Suzhou City. Countless fragments of the spirit boundary fell around him like rain. Su Xiu frowned slightly when he saw the face of the young man in black. He wasn't unfamiliar with the young man's face. It was exactly the same as Zhuowen's. The black-clothed Zhuowen slowly walked through the air and landed in front of Su Xiu. "Big brother Zhuo," Su Su raised her head with difficulty and looked at the black-clothed Zhuowen in front of her, as she muttered in a low voice. "Let her go," the black-clothed Zhuowen said coldly. However, Su Xiu sneered. "Who do you think you are? Do you think I'll let you go just because you told me to?" The black-clothed Zhuowen didn't refute. He said indifferently, "Void Sky 5th Stage. Your cultivation isn't bad. Unfortunately, your body has hidden dangers. You set up the Blood Fiend formation under the battlefield to treat your body's hidden dangers, right?" Su Xiu's pupils shrank. He didn't expect the black-clothed young man in front of him to see through his cultivation with a single glance. He even saw through the extremely hidden Blood Fiend formation. Su Xiu's gaze became fearful. He discovered that no matter how he probed, he couldn't detect any aura from this person. Su Xiu's forehead began to sweat. He discovered that his judgment was completely wrong. He originally guessed that the young man in front of him had a cultivation similar to his and was just hiding it. However, he now discovered that the young man in front of him was very likely stronger than him. Moreover, the young man was much stronger than him. However, how could there be a Void Sky cultivator stronger than him in such a remote place like Heavenly Spirit Star? Weren't powerful Void Sky cultivators all in those bustling star fields? How could they come to such a remote and desolate place? Soon, Su Xiu discovered that he couldn't move his body. Then, a palm gradually enlarged in his eyes. Finally, his consciousness sank into darkness. Su Yi and Ling Tianzong watched in shock as the black-clothed Zhuowen annihilated Su Xiu with one move. Their bodies trembled and their eyes were filled with reverence. "The two of you continue. I've taken care of this evil cultivator. He won't affect your battle anymore." After saying this, the black-clothed Zhuowen returned to Suzhou City with Su Su. Ling Tianzong smiled bitterly. He cupped his fists at Su Yi and said, "Brother Su, let's stop the battle here. Our Ling family will compensate for everything your Su family has lost by 3 times. After witnessing Zhuowen's strength, Ling Tianzong didn't dare to provoke the Su family anymore. Although Zhuowen didn't interfere, Ling Tianzong didn't dare to continue the battle. If he forced the Su family into a corner, their Ling family might be completely annihilated by this terrifying expert. Su Yi nodded. He also didn't have the desire to continue the battle. After witnessing Zhuowen's strength, he felt like a frog at the bottom of a well. He was also somewhat disinterested in this kind of battle. In the northernmost part of the Six Desires heavenly domain, Zhuowen quietly looked at the dense meteorite belt in front of him. In the center of this dense meteorite belt, there was a huge black sphere. Upon closer inspection, the surface of this sphere was covered with fiery red crack. It was as if the center of this sphere was filled with endless flames and magma. Inside this extinguished star is the Su family's forbidden area recorded in the Jade Slip. Chapter 2467. Shui Yunzi. The moment Zhuowen drilled into the black sphere, a terrifyingly hot temperature assaulted his senses. He felt as if his entire body was on fire. His whole body turned red, and he felt extremely uncomfortable. The surface of the black sphere was cooled magma. Inside the black sphere was a terrifying mixture of flames and magma that looked like gold. The temperature inside had already reached a terrifying level. Even Zhuowen's body turned red from the heat. He had no choice but to take out the everlasting ice lotus to resist the heat. After about half an incense stick's worth of time, Zhuowen went deep into the core of the star. The core of the star was completely exhausted and looked a little dim and dark. Even so, the core of the star was still the core of the star. It was also the place with the most terrifying temperature. Zhuowen observed the core for a long time. Other than the core in the center, he did not discover anything else. Could it be that Su Ye's map is fake? Zhuowen muttered to himself. However, he quickly discarded this thought. Su Yi knew that he was a powerful Void Sky cultivator, so taking out a fake map wouldn't do her any good. It might even bring about a calamity. In Zhuowen's opinion, Suyi had no reason to give him a fake map to fool him. Let's search again. Zhuowen did not believe it. His powerful spiritual consciousness began to radiate. His spirit soul was much stronger than before. The number of spirit constellations in his spirit soul had reached 8,000. Once Zhuowen's spirit constellation broke through 100 million, Zhuowen believed that his spirit soul would be on par with the Void Sky 9 Steps extreme boundary of life and death. However, the cultivation of the spirit soul was more difficult than cultivation. Without great opportunities, the cultivation speed would be extremely slow. Zhuowen had experienced it before, so he knew very well how difficult it was to cultivate the spirit soul. Zhuowen's spiritual consciousness radiated in all directions, not letting go of a single trace of his surroundings. All of a sudden, Zhuowen gasped. He moved as fast as the wind, dashing to the deepest core of the star. The temperature of the star core was indeed terrifying. Fortunately, Zhuowen's everlasting ice lotus was not ordinary. That terrifying temperature did not cause too much damage to Zhuowen. Arriving in front of the star nucleus, Zhuowen's spiritual consciousness repeatedly scanned the surface of the star nucleus. Finally, he found a very small crack on the left side of the star nucleus. This crack was extremely inconspicuous. If Zhuowen hadn't inspected it so carefully, he wouldn't have noticed it at all. Zhuowen's spirit was shaken, and he came to the front of the crack. His spiritual consciousness entered the crack. The moment his consciousness drilled into the deepest part of the crack, a purple intent suddenly wrapped around Zhuowen's consciousness. It was like a giant purple hand that wanted to crush Zhuowen's consciousness. The appearance of the purple intent was too sudden, and Zhuowen was immediately hit. However, he made a prompt decision and immediately cut off his consciousness. Then, he opened his eyes and spat out a mouthful of blood. His face was already pale and bloodless. Is that the power of Tao intent? Zhuowen's eyes revealed a look of horror. He was too familiar with the purple intent that wrapped around his consciousness. It was the power of Tao intent. It seems that the Su family's forbidden area should be inside the star nucleus. Zhuowen was not surprised, but happy. He swallowed a healing pill and adjusted his body to the best state. Then, he began to dig along the crack. The hardness of the star nucleus was beyond Zhuowen's imagination. Even if he used the king's sword to continuously dig, he could only dig a hole the size of a fist after an hour. The star nucleus is the hardest thing in a star. Your king's sword can't dig it at all. If it wasn't for the death chi in the king's sword, it would be wishful thinking to dig a hole the size of a fist. At this moment, the pill emperor turtle appeared on Zhuowen's shoulder and shook its head. You have a way? Zhuowen knew that the pill emperor turtle must have a way. Otherwise, this guy would not have come out. Burn it with fire. Only when the star nucleus is wrapped in fire will it gradually soften. Moreover, it must be a strong flame. Don't you have the alchemy fire? Let the alchemy fire help you. The pill emperor turtle said. Zhuowen nodded. The alchemy fire was still with the black-clothed Zhuowen. Now, he could only ask the black-clothed Zhuowen to come here. Fortunately, through his divine sense, Zhuowen also learned that the black-clothed Zhuowen had completely eliminated the evil cultivator hiding on the heavenly spirit star. So, it was obviously a good time for the black-clothed Zhuowen to leave. After waiting for a few hours, the black-clothed Zhuowen also entered the vicinity of the star nucleus. According to the instructions of the original Zhuowen, it used the alchemy fire to completely wrap the star nucleus. After a while, Zhuowen was pleasantly surprised to find that the originally indestructible star nucleus began to soften like melting snow. Zhuowen continued to wait. He planned to dig the star nucleus out after it had completely softened. In an extremely luxurious mansion of the Drifting Sand family in the Gulan Galaxy, a pale-faced man in blood-red clothes slowly opened his eyes. There was a trace of viciousness and hatred in his eyes. How dare you kill one of my blood corpses and destroy the blood evil formation that the blood corpses spent a lot of effort to set up? I'm going to kill you with my own hands. The red-clothed man roared furiously. But soon, the man in blood-red clothes calmed down. His eyes flickered as he said, "This guy's aura seems to be around the void heaven 8 steps, but he gives me a sense of threat. This guy is definitely not an ordinary void heaven 8 steps expert. I have to discuss this with Kwang Li." Thinking of this, Shui Yunzi left the mansion and walked to the place where Kwang Li was in seclusion. "Master Shui Yunzi, Master Kwang Li is still in seclusion. If there is nothing important," he said not to disturb him. 2 guards respectfully stopped Shui Yunzi. Shui Yunzi frowned slightly and said coldly, "What's wrong with Kwang Li? I remember that he just came out of seclusion not long ago, right? Why is he in seclusion again?" "Master Kwang Li was injured by a despicable man named Zhuowen. He has been in seclusion ever since, so," one of the guards said cautiously. Shui Yunzi nodded, but the moment he heard the name Zhuowen, his eyes widened and he hurriedly said, "What did you say just now? Zhuowen was the one who killed Kwang Li? Do you have a video of Zhuowen?" The guard looked troubled. Kwang Li being injured by a junior like Zhuowen wasn't something to be proud of. If he were to show Kwang Li the video and let Kwang Li know, he would definitely be punished. However, Shui Yunzi was not an ordinary person. He was the guest elder of the Quicksand family and a half-step Void Heaven 9 steps expert. Even Kwang Li did not dare to be rude to him. He also could not afford to offend such an existence. "What? Are you looking down on me? Is that why you don't want to show me the video?" Shui Yunzi's eyes suddenly turned cold. Chapter 2468. Stone Gate. Shui Yunzi nodded. He took the crystal ball and looked at it for a while. Then, he squinted his eyes and thought to himself, "It really is Zhuowen. But this Zhuowen is so strong and has comprehended space-time divine sense. No wonder Kwang Li was seriously injured by him." The more Shui Yunzi watched, the more frightened he became. In the image, Kwang Li could not resist at all under the effect of the space-time divine sense. Shui Yunzi did not think that his strength was much stronger than Kwang Li's. He believed that if he was under the effect of such a terrifying space-time divine sense, he would also be seriously injured or even killed. Shui Yunzi was afraid. Fortunately, he came to discuss with Kwang Li in advance. Otherwise, he would be in trouble if he rashly looked for Zhuowen. "Master Shui Yunzi, do you know about the arrest warrant issued by 6 Desires Palace?" Suddenly, the guard asked cautiously. Shui Yunzi was stunned. He really did not know about the arrest warrant issued by 6 Desires Palace. Most of the time, he stayed in his mansion and used the connection with the blood corpses to set up the blood evil array on the remote planets so that he could refine blood chi for cultivation. Shui Yunzi did not only have blood corpses on the heavenly spirit star, but also on other remote planets. With so many blood corpses, the amount of blood chi they provided him every day was absolutely terrifying. Now, Shui Yunzi's strength had even surpassed Kwang Li's and was not far from the life enlightenment realm. As long as Shui Yunzi could comprehend a trace of the law of heaven, he would immediately be promoted to the life enlightenment realm. In fact, Shui Yunzi did not care that the blood corpses on the heavenly spirit star were destroyed. The main reason why he noticed the blood corpses on the heavenly spirit star was that there was an 8 steps void heaven expert like Zhuowen there. Moreover, Zhuowen was not an ordinary 8 steps void heaven expert, which was why Shui Yunzi noticed Zhuowen. It was precisely because he had noticed Zhuowen that he was able to learn of this string of events related to Zhuowen. The guard didn't wait for Shui Yunzi to speak and continued. "I happened to see the arrest warrant, and the target is also Zhuowen. It's just that his name has been changed to dragon characters, but his face is exactly the same. Even the 6 Desires Palace is looking for him. What did he do that made the 6 Desires Palace go to war with him?" Shui Yunzi was shocked. After all, the Six Desires Palace was the ruler of the Six Desires heavenly domain. Every move of such a force naturally had a great impact on the other cultivators in the Six Desires heavenly domain. Is there any reward for this arrest warrant? Blood Cloud Master suddenly asked. Others might not know what Zhuowen was up to, but he was very clear about it. Before he reported Zhuowen, he wanted to see what kind of price Six Desires Palace would offer. The reward for finding out Long Wen's whereabouts and reporting it to the Six Desires Palace is said to be 10,000 supreme grade divine stones and a free chance to enter the Six Desires heavenly lake. If someone can catch Zhuowen, not only will he be rewarded, but he will also be eligible to join the Six Desires Palace as a senior member and enjoy all the resources of the Six Desires Palace for free. The guard's eyes were full of yearning as he said this. The Six Desires Palace was like a sacred place in the eyes of all the cultivators in the Six Desires heavenly domain. Everyone wanted to enter the Six Desires Palace. However, the conditions for the Six Desires Palace to recruit disciples were too harsh. Moreover, it was even more impossible to become a high-ranking member of the Six Desires Palace step by step. Therefore, the Six Desires Palace must have put in a lot of effort to offer such conditions. The moment Shui Yunzi heard this condition, his eyes immediately became blazing. Senior Shui Yunzi, if you really have something urgent, I'll go in and ask Master Kuang Li. Before the guard finished his words, he was interrupted by Shui Yunzi. No need, it's fine now. The guard looked at Shui Yunzi, who turned around and left. Obviously, he didn't expect Shui Yunzi to change his attitude faster than flipping a book. Inside the Desire Palace, Palace Master Wujue sat in his seat with a gloomy look, but he was a little anxious in his heart. Desireless was related to whether he could reach the Tao realm in the future or not. She couldn't let anything happen to Desireless. She had to find him as soon as possible. However, it had been some time since the arrest warrant was issued, but there was no news of him. This made Palace Master Wujue extremely angry. He's just an 8 steps void sky brat. How could there be no news of him after so many days? Even the borders of the Six Desires heavenly domain have been sealed off. Where could he be hiding? Palace Master Wujue's heart was filled with hatred, but he felt extremely helpless. The Six Desires Palace had sent many people to countless star domains and issued arrest warrants, but there was still no news of Zhuowen. This made Palace Master Wujue even more anxious and resentful of Zhuowen. If he could find that brat, he would definitely let that brat have a taste of his own medicine. Suddenly, a disciple of the Desire Palace rushed in, causing Palace Master Wujue to frown. Palace Master, there's news of Long One, the disciple said in surprise. Palace Master Wujue quickly got up and said, Is that true? Does this person know the location of Long One? This person knows, but he didn't say the specific location of Long One. He said that he needs us to go to his place, and then he will take us there. That person is called Shui Yunzi, and he is located in the Gulan Galaxy, the disciple said. Palace Master Wujue nodded and said, Let's go. Follow me to the Gulan Galaxy. The temperature of the alchemic fire was very high. After several hours, the star core finally softened, and Zhuowen's digging became much easier. Not long after, Zhuowen dug out a rather deep tunnel. Zhuowen slipped into the tunnel like a wisp of smoke. When he reached the end of the passage, Zhuowen stopped. In front of him was a huge stone door that was 3 feet tall. The surface of the stone door was covered with dense purple patterns, and a purple intent lingered on the surface of the stone door. Zhuowen knew that his divine sense was annihilated by the power of the purple intent on the surface of the stone door. What a powerful Tao intent! What is hidden behind this stone door? When he felt the terrifying purple intent on the surface of the stone door, Zhuowen couldn't help but widen his eyes. His Tao intent had already been comprehended to the 7th level, but he could feel that the power of the Tao intent on the stone door was even stronger than the 7th level Tao intent he had comprehended. This feeling was comparable to the moment when Zhuowen comprehended a trace of the 9th-level Tao intent. After hesitating for a moment, Zhuowen stretched out his hand and placed it on the surface of the stone door. Instantly, countless purple intent flowed from Zhuowen's hand and spread throughout his body. Chapter 2469. Violet Prison. The Tao that can be spoken is an extraordinary Tao. The name that can be spoken is an extraordinary name. The nameless is the beginning of the heavens and the earth. The named is the mother of all things. So it's often nothing to desire to observe its profundity. It's often there to desire to observe its profundity. These two come from the same source yet have different names, and they're both called profundities. Profundities within profundities, the door of profundities. The ethereal voice slowly reverberated by Zhuowen's ears. If you want to enter the door of profundities, then you must first escape your own shackles and prisons before you have the qualifications to possess it. Suddenly, a firm and low voice broke the ethereal voice, and then Zhuowen abruptly opened his eyes. What entered his eyes was a violet-colored world, and the surroundings of this violet-colored world were covered in dense violet-colored iron bars, causing this violet-colored world to seem like a violet-colored prison. Right above the violet-colored world floated a violet-colored revolving sphere, and the surface of this sphere was completely formed from violet-colored gas, causing it to look extremely strange. At the same time, Zhuowen noticed numerous figures that sat cross-legged within this violet-colored prison, and there were a few hundred of them with a rough glance. But these figures were all distributed in every corner of the prison, and they sat cross-legged without saying a word and not caring about each other. Moreover, Zhuowen noticed that all these figures actually contained the energy of Tao insight, and the lowest amongst them was first-level Tao insight, whereas he'd even seen a person that had comprehended 8th-level Tao insight. The Tao that can be spoken is an extraordinary Tao. The name that can be spoken is an extraordinary name. The nameless is the beginning of the heavens and the earth. The named is the mother of all things. So it's often nothing to desire to observe its profundity. It's often there to desire to observe its profundity. These two come from the same source yet have different names, and they're both called profundities. Profundities within profundities, the door of profundities. The ethereal voice resounded out once more, and then Zhuowen noticed that the few hundred figures that sat cross-legged had opened their eyes successively. These eyes didn't contain the slightest emotion, and they were instead filled with a strange violet color. When Zhuowen saw these gazes, he knew that all of them had fallen into an illusion of Tao insight. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. The hundreds of figures that were originally motionless all flew up into the sky. Then, under Zhuowen's astonished gaze, they actually began to kill each other. One figure after another fell from the sky. Zhuowen discovered that the figures that were killed did not really die. Instead, after they fell to the ground, the purple sphere in the sky shot out a purple light, and the dead figures began to revive. However, the will of the way of these resurrected figures had all been stripped away. Zhuowen looked up at the sky, and his eyes revealed a look of understanding. The Tao intent of those cultivators who became more and more courageous as they fought increased by a lot with every kill. Boom! Suddenly, the sound of something breaking through the air blasted towards Zhuowen. Zhuowen coldly snorted, and subconsciously wanted to take out the king's sword from his spirit ring, but found that his spirit ring could not be opened in this space. It was also this brief moment of surprise that revealed his fatal flaw. The figure that rushed over fiercely punched Zhuowen in the chest. Zhuowen groaned, and a trace of blood spilled from the corner of his mouth. Fortunately, his physical body was extremely strong. Although this punch was terrifying, it was not fatal. Boom, boom, boom. The figure that attacked Zhuowen did not show any mercy. The moment Zhuowen retreated, he took a step forward and followed up with another attack. Zhuowen's eyes were cold. He radiated his powerful divine sense and found that his divine sense was actually completely suppressed. However, his divine sense was so strong that even though it was suppressed, it could still radiate a distance of several meters. With the help of his divine sense, Zhuowen easily dodged the attack. Then, he suddenly clenched his fist, and the power of Tao insight gathered on his fist. He slammed his fist on the figure's head, smashing it directly. Thump! After the figure fell, Zhuowen found that a purple intent swept out from the figure's head and finally entered his body. The power of his Tao insight seemed to have increased a little. However, at the same time, Zhuowen also found that his consciousness began to be a little affected by this inexplicably increased power of Tao insight. Zhuowen's face was gloomy. He knew that this inexplicably increased Tao insight was definitely not a good thing. Although it could increase the power of Tao insight, it could also turn one into a beast without the ability to think. In fact, he even discovered that there was an additional black paste in his soul. This black paste emitted black gas, and it was actually polluting the galaxies in his divine soul space. Fortunately, Zhuowen's divine soul was so strong that it had 8,000 galaxies, which was equivalent to a small starry sky. This black paste was so small that the range of pollution was extremely limited. But Zhuowen didn't dare be careless, because he knew very well that along with the increase in the number of people he killed, this black paste would accumulate more and more in his divine soul, and there would come a day when it would pollute his entire divine soul. When he thought up to here, Zhuowen became even more cautious. At the same time, he didn't stand out forcefully. So long as those figures didn't offend him, then he would absolutely not make a move, and he would only silently observe. According to Zhuowen's inference, this violet-colored space was very likely related to the so-called door of profundity. But he was slightly bewildered. He only knew that the door of profundity was related to Tao insight, yet he still didn't know what exactly the door of profundity was. Zhuowen sat cross-legged at a corner and utilized his divine sense to completely conceal the aura of his Tao insight. Zhuowen believed that within this space, he was probably the only person that was still able to utilize his divine sense. Coupled with the other people in this space that had already lost their reason. So long as they couldn't sense the energy of Tao insight in his body, then they would basically be unable to find him. As the battle continued, the number of people fighting in the sky became fewer and fewer. In the end, only a single figure remained. This was a black-clothed man around the age of 30. His skin was dark, and at this moment, the violet Tao insight on his body was extremely dense and dazzling, as if he was a terrifying violet sun. Zhuowen's gaze became extremely solemn when he sensed the violet Tao insight on this black-clothed man. He was able to sense that the Tao insight on this person's body had even surpassed the 8th level Tao insight and had already touched upon a trace of the 9th level Tao insight. "I want to leave this place. Get the hell out here." The black-clothed man floated in midair and raised his head to look at the violet sphere in the sky, and his gaze was filled with desire and battle intent. As soon as the black-clothed man finished speaking, the violet sphere suddenly surged up, and then the violet sphere transformed into an enormous violet beast that possessed 4 heads. Zhuowen's pupils couldn't help but constrict at the instant he saw this enormous beast, because he noticed that the 4 heads of this enormous beast were actually the azure dragon, white tiger, vermilion bird, and black tortoise. Weren't these 4 sacred beasts the sacred beasts of legend that had once appeared in the heavenly armor continent? Moreover, it wasn't just that. The legends of the 4 sacred beasts were widely spread in the earth of the heaven domain of Huaxia. Chapter 2470. The confinement farm. At the instant the enormous beast appeared, the black-clothed man's eyes burst out with monstrous battle intent. "Fight! I'll be able to obtain my freedom by defeating you." The black-clothed man suddenly flashed out. The violet Tao insight on his body was like a blazing sun that spread throughout the entire space. Bang! 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 The black-clothed man collided with the enormous beast, and then a terrifying ripple swept through the entire space. Within this violet world, there were actually countless pitch-black holes that were like black holes. When the aftershock gradually disappeared, a figure in a sorry state directly fell down and smashed onto the ground. Zhuowen looked over. He knew that the black-clothed man had already been defeated. Moreover, the enormous beast had only used a single move to defeat the man. The price the man paid was his life. His entire body was torn apart, but he was quickly revived, and the energy of the Tao inside on his body had completely returned to zero. Zhuowen sat cross-legged at a corner and looked up at the enormous beast that had fused with the four divine beasts. Only now did he clearly sense that after the man was killed, the energy of the Tao inside on the man's body was completely devoured by the enormous beast. After devouring the energy of the Tao inside, the enormous beast was perfectly satisfied, and it once again transformed into a violet sphere that was like a violet blazing sun that hung high in the sky. Damn it! There'll be a day when I defeat you, and then I'll regain my freedom and leave this place. The black-clothed man hammered the ground with unwillingness, and then he stood up and walked to another corner before sitting cross-legged and starting to cultivate from scratch. Zhuowen looked around and felt a trace of fear in his heart. He noticed that this space was truly too similar to the confinement farms in the mortal world. The enormous beast devoured the owner of the confinement farm, whereas the animals they were trapped here were the livestock that were being reared in the confinement farm. When the owner needed food to slaughter livestock, they would usually start from the largest and fattest livestock to slaughter. Moreover, wasn't the fattest livestock precisely this black-clothed man? Zhuowen shook his head. So long as they were trapped in this confinement farm and ate the feed provided by the owner of the confinement farm, then these livestock would forever be restrained by the owner and would forever be unable to have the freedom to escape. After Zhuowen killed one of them earlier, he'd already noticed that something was off. The energy of the Tao insight absorbed from here was fundamentally flawed, and there was even an extremely terrifying black paste within it. It was the black paste that caused Zhuowen to be extremely wary. Zhuowen dared guarantee that if he was killed by the enormous beast, then even though he could be revived, the 7th level Tao insight he'd comprehended with great difficulty would be completely devoured by the enormous beast. I have to get that black paste out first. Zhuowen's eyes were solemn. The black paste that had entered his sea of consciousness was really a big problem for him. His intuition told him that if the black paste continued to exist in his sea of consciousness, it would be extremely unfavorable for him. Bang bang bang! At this moment, the few hundred people that had been resurrected all possessed a small amount of Tao insight energy. After that, these people once again tirelessly started to kill each other and seize the Tao insight energy in the bodies of others. Due to the protection of Zhuowen's divine sense, the Tao insight energy in his body didn't leak out at all. This also caused the others to not notice Zhuowen. Zhuowen concentrated his energy and operated the 8,000 galaxies in his sea of consciousness. The terrifying divine sense was like a violent hurricane that constantly consumed the black paste that existed in Zhuowen's sea of consciousness. To Zhuowen's pleasant surprise, his powerful starry sky divine sense was really able to consume the black paste, but the consumption rate was extremely slow. After Zhuowen eliminated the black paste with great difficulty, he discovered that a new round of battle had once again come to an end, and the final victor was the black-clothed man again. The black-clothed man's willpower was extremely strong. Although he had been killed by the enormous beast countless times, he would start all over again every time. After obtaining the final victory, he still wasn't afraid of death and challenged the enormous beast again. The result this time was still the same as the last time. He was still instantly killed by the enormous beast with a single move. Zhuowen's gaze became extremely serious. The black-clothed man had killed everyone, and the Tao insight energy in his body had already reached the level of a trace of 9th level Tao insight. However, he was still instantly killed by the enormous beast with a single move. Zhuowen knew that if he wanted to have the strength to fight this enormous beast, he must possess the strength of 9th level Tao insight. Of course, Zhuowen also suspected that the enormous beast being able to kill the black-clothed man so easily was probably related to the black paste. When he thought of this, Zhuowen became even more fearful of the black paste. However, Zhuowen also secretly rejoiced in his heart. His soul was different from ordinary cultivators, so even though there were restrictions here, it wasn't completely restrained and couldn't be used. Moreover, his divine sense was similarly capable of expelling the black paste. Moreover, after expelling the black paste, Zhuowen was pleasantly surprised to discover that his divine sense had actually strengthened slightly. With this discovery, Zhuowen was extremely delighted in his heart. He slowly stood up and withdrew the divine sense that was set up around his body before instantly releasing the aura of his Tao insight. Instantly, the eyes of the two nearby cultivators were filled with a violet intent, and they roared like wild beasts as they flashed towards Zhuowen. Zhuowen took a step forward and suddenly blasted out with his fists, instantly killing the two of them. 2 strands of Tao insight energy flowed through his hands and entered his body. At the same time, 2 more black paste appeared in his sea of consciousness. After killing the 2 of them, Zhuowen once again released his divine sense and concealed his Tao insight energy. After that, he sat cross-legged in a corner and started to use his divine sense to refine the black paste. Since this black paste could strengthen his divine sense, why wouldn't Zhuowen do it? Naturally, he planned to slowly temper his divine sense here. Zhuowen knew that as long as his divine soul galaxy could break through 100 million, then his divine sense would become extremely huge, enough to be comparable to the life and death extremes. At that time, if he relied on this divine sense to execute the soul kill, he was afraid that even the life and death extremes experts would be affected. Although it might not cause too much damage to the life and death extremes experts, it could at least restrain the life and death extremes cultivators. Thinking of this, Zhuowen worked even harder to refine the black paste. This was a good thing for him, so he wouldn't let it go just like that. Time passed by minute. Zhuowen didn't know how long he had stayed in this purple space. He only knew that the endless battle repeated over and over again, and the final winner was always the black-clothed man. Every time the black-clothed man challenged the 4 giant beasts, it would end in failure. Finally, Zhuowen slowly opened his eyes. In the depths of his eyes, which seemed to carry a golden light, was a vast and boundless starry sky. Zhuowen's temperament had become even more unusual. If one looked carefully, they would find that Zhuowen looked very ordinary, but when one looked at him, one would feel an extraordinary feeling. Chapter 2471. The black-clothed man's counterattack. At this moment, even if Zhuowen didn't have to intentionally control his divine sense, the energy of the Tao insight on his body had automatically withdrawn into his body. Because in the process of ceaselessly refining the black paste and absorbing the Tao insight, his Tao insight had automatically advanced to the 8th level. This Tao insight was something that he had comprehended on his own. Even though he had borrowed the power of the Tao insight in this space, Zhuowen knew that this Tao insight was completely his own and not something that the master of this space had given him. Because the energy of the Tao insight within his body didn't have the hidden dangers of the black paste. Even if he faced the 4 enormous beasts, it was impossible for Zhuowen to be restrained and defeated in a single move like the black-clothed man. The Tao that can be Tao is not an ordinary Tao. The name that can be named is not an ordinary name. The nameless is the beginning of the heavens and the earth. The named is the mother of all things. Therefore, there is nothing that desires to observe its profundities. There is something that desires to observe its mysteries. These two come from the same origin yet have different names, and they are both called profundities within profundities. The ethereal voice resounded out once more, and the cultivators that sat cross-legged in the surroundings leaped up successively like walking corpses before fighting each other once more and absorbing the Tao insight from each other. Zhuowen walked amidst this slaughter like a lone traveler, and no one noticed his existence nor did they feel the sound of his footsteps. Zhuowen raised his head to look at the numerous figures that were fighting, and his gaze contained a trace of pity. He knew that these people had completely become livestock in this violet-colored world, and they would have to provide nourishment for the Tao insight of the four enormous beasts for eternity. Moreover, Zhuowen wouldn't join in this meaningless slaughter like they had. He had to find the exit here, and once he found the exit, he would be able to leave this place. Zhuowen believed that since this place was created, then there was surely an exit. Of course, based on the black-clothed man's display, it seemed that he would be able to leave this minor world after defeating the four enormous beasts. But Zhuowen didn't believe in this possibility. Could livestock defeat the owner of the farm? Perhaps it was possible, but Zhuowen knew that this possibility was extremely small. Zhuowen would never use such a risky method if he wasn't completely confident. Moreover, after this period of observation, Zhuowen had figured out the identities of these few hundred people. These people were all the geniuses of the Su clan in the past generations, and they were all geniuses that had comprehended 8th level Tao insight. If Zhuowen guessed correctly, the black-clothed man who won every time was probably the Su family's ancestor, the guy who obtained the purple jade and led the Su family to rise. However, it was a pity that the Su clan's successive generations of patriarchs had all become like this, becoming the producers of Tao intent for the four enormous beasts within the door of profundity. In other words, they were the so-called livestock that could be slaughtered by anyone. Now, Zhuowen suspected that the door of profundity was related to the Grand Pure One. Moreover, Zhuowen also discovered that he had been wrong. He had thought that there would be a teleportation array or a place to travel through time and space. He had not expected it to be a prison. However, Zhuowen had a premonition that so long as he left this place, then the true exit would absolutely not be the Six Desires' heavenly domain. When he arrived at the edge of the violet-colored prison, Zhuowen noticed that this edge was surrounded by violet-colored fences. As for outside the violet-colored fences, Zhuowen noticed that it was an expanse of violet mist, and he was utterly unable to clearly see what exactly was at the end of the violet mist. Even if Zhuowen's divine sense was extended out, he noticed that it was completely blurry. In other words, even his divine sense was utterly unable to detect anything within this violet mist. Zhuowen's brows knit together. He noticed that this world of violet mist was truly too strange, and he kept having the feeling that the other end of the violet mist was surely related to the exit. Moreover, if he wanted to leave, then he had to break through the iron fences here. But during this period of time, Zhuowen had ceaselessly investigated, and he noticed that this iron fence was utterly impossible to break through. Unless it was the strength of a 9th level Tao insight, otherwise, breaking through the iron fence was utterly a delusion. Roar! A bestial roar exploded out of thin air, and the four giant beasts appeared once again. However, the black-clothed man was still awe-inspiring and fearless. He had once again obtained the final victory and faced the four giant beasts once again. Zhuowen turned around and raised his head to look at the tenacious black-clothed man. His gaze revealed that he was moved. After observing for a period of time, Zhuowen noticed that the rest of the people had all fallen into this slaughter, and only the black-clothed man's consciousness was still hovering between being clear-headed and being lost. It was precisely because of this that the black-clothed man was able to obtain the final victory every time. Roar! The four giant beasts roared loudly, and their gigantic beast claws descended from the sky, crushing towards the black-clothed man. The black-clothed man let out a long howl towards the sky, and the violet intent on his entire body suddenly boiled and actually transformed into a violet mist that stretched as far as the eye could see. Then, within this violet mist, a pattering of violet rain poured down. The black-clothed man clenched his fists in the air, and a violet sword with a swirling violet light condensed in each of his hands. He has touched the threshold of the 9th level Tao insight. Zhuowen's gaze revealed astonishment as he looked at the black-clothed man who was bathed in violet jade. The four giant beasts revealed even more furious expressions. They never imagined that this human, who was their food, would actually be able to comprehend a trace of the 9th-level Tao insight. He was clearly just food, yet he actually dared to attack his master, and this caused the four giant beasts to be extremely furious. The four giant beasts intended to properly teach this stubborn human a lesson. Bang! The four giant beasts' gigantic claws blasted towards the black-clothed man, and those enormous claws contained terrifying Tao insight. As expected, these four giant beasts have grasped the strength of the 9th-level Tao insight. Sensing the giant beast's claws, Zhuowen's gaze flickered slightly, and he lightly sighed in his heart. However, what puzzled Zhuowen was that the might of the claws blasted out by these four giant beasts wasn't as strong as he imagined. It seemed to be stronger than the trace of the 9th-level Tao insight that he had comprehended in the past, but it wasn't that much stronger. This feeling was very strange. Zhuowen clearly saw that these four giant beasts had grasped the 9th-level Tao insight, but in his eyes, he instead felt that the power of these giant beasts' 9th-level Tao insight wasn't very strong. In his senses, he felt that the 9th-level Tao insight of these giant beasts seemed to be lacking something, but he couldn't figure out what it was exactly. This claw directly tore apart the violet mist, and it blasted towards the black-clothed man. The black-clothed man roared towards the sky, and the violet sword in his hands suddenly slashed out. On the other hand, he was like a ghost as he disappeared on the spot. Not only did he dodge the giant beast's claws, but the terrifying violet sword chi from his two swords directly blasted open a huge wound on the giant beast's claws. The four giant beasts were extremely furious, and they blasted out their claws one after another. However, after the black-clothed man had touched the threshold of the 9th-level Tao insight, his mind was much clearer than before. As he dodged the giant beast's attacks, he continuously blasted the giant beasts' bodies with his sword. Chapter 2472. Su Clan's First Ancestor Roar. The four enormous beasts roared and actually split into four, transforming into the azure dragon, white tiger, vermilion bird, and black tortoise. But their entire bodies were formed from violet light. The four sacred beasts split into four directions and blasted towards the black-clothed man in unison. The black-clothed man obviously never imagined that the four enormous beasts would split into four, and he was only able to block the attacks from three directions, whereas the one on his back was directly smashed heavily by the black tortoise's python tail, causing him to let out a muffled groan before directly smashing onto the ground. Moreover, the cooperation of the four sacred beasts was extremely tacit. At the instant the black-clothed man fell, they once again transformed into four violet lights, and terrifying attacks descended onto the black-clothed man successively. Subsequently, the black-clothed man practically suffered a beating passively. The attacks of the four sacred beasts were too terrifying, and if it wasn't for the black-clothed man comprehending a trace of 9th-level Tao insight, he would probably have been killed at this moment. But even then, the black-clothed man was still on the verge of collapse, and he seemed as if he would fall at any moment. Zhuowen glanced at him before silently sitting cross-legged on the ground, as he knew that the black-clothed man would die without a doubt in another 10 moves. Sure enough, a shrill cry resounded out as the black-clothed man was torn into pieces by the four sacred beasts. Subsequently, the black-clothed man revived once more at a corner of the violet-colored world, but the energy of the 9th-level Tao insight in his body had already been completely stripped away. Zhuowen shook his head. He knew that now that the black-clothed man had been killed, he would probably have no chance to leave this place in the future. The black-clothed man thought of this as well, and his gaze revealed a sense of loss and despair. But in next to no time, his gaze once again emitted hope and unswerving determination, and he once again sat cross-legged on the ground and waited for the next round of slaughter. All of this was noticed by Zhuowen, and Zhuowen slightly admired this black-clothed man in his heart. If this black-clothed man was really the Su clan's first ancestor, then this person had been trapped here for countless years. But this person still wasn't crushed by this sort of long period of loneliness, and he was instead still filled with hope and unswerving determination. This person's willpower was something that even Zhuowen felt slightly inferior to. But it was all thanks to this person that Zhuowen found out about the true strength of the four divine beasts, and he knew that so long as he was able to smoothly comprehend a trace of 9th-level Tao insight, then he would be able to obtain victory. As for why the black-clothed man had failed, Zhuowen suspected that it had something to do with the black paste. It was likely that the black paste had caused severe interference to the black-clothed man's sea of consciousness during the battle, which was why he had failed. With Zhuowen's eyesight, he actually felt that the black-clothed man would win. Even if he couldn't win, it was impossible for him to be defeated so easily by the four sacred beasts. The ethereal voice sounded again. Zhuowen smiled and slowly stood up. This time, he was prepared to participate in this battle. His Tao insight had already reached the 8th level, and the number of divine soul galaxies in his sea of consciousness had reached a terrifying number of over 100 million. With the current strength of his spiritual sense, that black paste would be crushed by his spiritual sense in an instant and would not affect him at all. The reason Zhuowen was participating in the battle this time was naturally for the sake of charging into the 9th-level Tao insight. After all, the black-clothed man had charged into a trace of 9th-level Tao insight from nothing, whereas Zhuowen had relied on himself to comprehend 8th-level Tao insight, and his starting point was much higher than everyone here. So he was confident that if he obtained the final victory, then his Tao insight would transform to the terrifying 9th level. Kill! Numerous figures leaped into midair with killing intent that shot into the sky. The smile on the corners of Zhuowen's mouth grew wider and wider as he walked forward slowly, and his footsteps grew swifter and swifter as the battle intent in his gaze rose swiftly. Zhuowen let out a long howl as he leaped into midair, and then his hands clenched in the air to condense two violet-colored swords. He strode out step by step, and all the cultivators that blocked his path were completely annihilated by him. As he felt the Tao insight energy that rose swiftly within his body, Zhuowen felt extremely carefree in his heart, and his spiritual sense rose along with it. The surrounding cultivators were basically unable to withstand a single sword strike from Zhuowen. The black-clothed man noticed how terrifying Zhuowen was as well, and his brows knit together, yet he didn't seek death by battling Zhuowen first, and he instead turned to battle the other cultivators. He was too familiar with the energy of Tao insight on Zhuowen's body, as this was an aura that only 8th-level Tao insights possessed. Wasn't he courting death by battling such a ferocious person now? Of course, the black-clothed man was extremely puzzled because this white-clothed young man was obviously an unfamiliar face. He'd fought here for so long, yet it was the first time he'd seen this white-clothed young man. Moreover, the battle had only just begun, yet this white-clothed young man already possessed the energy of 8th-level Tao insight, and this caused the black-clothed man to feel rather unbalanced in his heart. At the same time, he fought even more madly and practically disregarded his life. The two of them were like the black and white impermanence that reaped the lives of the surrounding cultivators, and they even greedily swallowed the energy of Tao insight within the bodies of the cultivators that were killed. When the last person was killed by Zhuowen with a swing of his sword, Zhuowen felt the Tao insight within his body had completely risen to the peak of the 8th-level Tao insight. Zhuowen stopped and looked at the black-clothed man before him. He knew that so long as he killed this black-clothed man, then he would be able to break through the barrier of the 8th-level Tao insight and enter the profundities of the 9th-level Tao insight. The black-clothed man had a serious gaze. He'd attained the 8th-level Tao insight as well, yet he wasn't at the peak of the 8th-level Tao insight like Zhuowen, and he'd only just entered the 8th-level Tao insight. After all, Zhuowen's starting point was too high. He'd attained the 8th level Tao insight from the beginning, and his speed of slaughter was much swifter than the black-clothed man. "Let's fight." Zhuowen held the violet sword with both hands as he looked indifferently at the black-clothed man before him. The black-clothed man didn't answer, yet he'd used his actions to answer Zhuowen. Swoosh, swoosh. The two of them transformed into two violet lights, and misty violet mist converged in the sky above them to transform into a surging violet mist world. Bang, bang, bang. Instantly, the two of them collided, and the dense sounds of metal colliding sounded out from within the violet mist. Two indistinct figures swiftly moved through the violet mist, and they collided with each other to create extremely terrifying sparks. Rumble! Suddenly, the violet mist roiled as a figure abruptly flew out, and then a violet sword flashed out from within the violet mist to pierce through this person's chest. After that, a formidable force brought along this person to fall to the ground and firmly nailed him to the ground. The black-clothed man raised his head with difficulty, and the corners of his mouth revealed a trace of a smile as he looked at the young man in fluttering white clothes slowly walking over from within the roiling violet mist. "In countless years, you're the first person to defeat me. What's your name?" The black-clothed man coughed up blood as he asked. "I'm Zhuowen," Zhuowen said indifferently. "You're not a descendant of the Su clan?" The black-clothed man's eyes stared wide open as he spoke with disbelief. "Who said that only members of the Su clan are able to comprehend the energy of Tao insight?" Zhuowen replied with a question. The black-clothed man's gaze froze, and he coughed up another mouthful of blood as he said with a smile, "That's true. Since you're able to defeat me, it means that you're not ordinary. Perhaps you'll be able to defeat the master of Tao insight, and at that time regain your freedom," the black-clothed man said with a blazing gaze. "Not perhaps but definitely." After Zhuowen finished speaking, he pulled out the violet sword from the black-clothed man's body. After that, the man let out a muffled groan and completely breathed his last, and the energy of Tao insight in his body was completely absorbed by Zhuowen. Of course, the black paste was extremely terrifying as it invaded Zhuowen's sea of consciousness. Chapter 2473. Violet Sun. The terrifying black-colored paste was like a black cloud that completely covered Zhuowen's sea of consciousness. Even if his soul was extremely formidable and terrifying, it was slightly strenuous for him to resist so much black-colored paste. Soul kill. Zhuowen's eyes abruptly opened and he immediately executed the formidable divine sense art, soul kill. Within his sea of consciousness, his divine sense that was like tidewater transformed into numerous terrifying storms that ceaselessly annihilated the black-colored paste that was scattered throughout his sea of consciousness. After executing it successively a few times, the black-colored paste within Zhuowen's sea of consciousness was finally completely eliminated. After that, Zhuowen felt a wave of coolness throughout his body as the energy of the Tao insight within his body erupted like a volcano and ceaselessly increased and accumulated. Rumble! Countless violet lights flashed out explosively from Zhuowen's body, and the violet lights slowly condensed into material to transform into misty violet mist. After that, the violet mist started to spray out violet rain that became more and more intense, and it seemed to have become a downpour. As he bathed in the violent violet rain, Zhuowen knew that he'd once again come into contact with that trace of 9th-level Tao insight. It's still not enough. Zhuowen's gaze focused as he suddenly swung the violet swords in his hands. Instantly, the violet mist in the sky roiled as the violent violet rain started to solidify and actually condense into extremely solid violet ice. At this moment, the black-clothed man that had been reborn raised his head to look at the violent violet ice that descended, and he couldn't help but gape. This kid has completely stepped into the threshold of 9th-level Tao insight. The black-clothed man's gaze revealed respect, and at the same time, there was a trace of hope. He wanted to see if this white-clothed young man that had stepped into the threshold of 9th-level Tao insight was able to defeat those 4 enormous beasts. Get the fuck out here. Zhuowen raised his head to look at the violet-colored ball as he spoke indifferently. As soon as these words were spoken, the violet-colored ball roiled violently, and then a roar resounded out as an enormous violet-colored enormous beast leaped out. But the violet-colored enormous beast revealed a trace of surprise at the instant it saw Zhuowen. Obviously, it wasn't the black-clothed man that challenged it this time, so it was slightly curious instead. But it quickly calmed down. Within this violet-colored barrier, no matter who challenged it, that person would become its meal in the end, so it didn't really care. Roar. The purple behemoth roared and waved its huge claws at Zhuowen. It seemed very casual. Apparently, the purple behemoth did not care much about Zhuowen. Zhuowen sneered in his heart. When he had summoned the purple beast, Zhuowen had already retracted the purple eyes. Poochie! Zhuowen leaped up and dodged the giant purple beast's claw. The purple swords in his hands slashed at the beast's claw without hesitation, directly cutting off the huge beast's claw. Ow ow ow! The purple giant beast let out a blood-curdling scream as its eyes turned red. It roared angrily, its killing intent boiling. It had never thought that one day, its claws would be chopped off by a mere human martial artist. This was simply a disgrace to it. It wanted to tear the human in front of it into pieces. However, just as the giant purple beast was enraged, the white-clothed young man had already stepped into the air. The purple swords in his hands merged together, and the purple swords instantly grew to a size of 10 feet. In an instant they brushed past the giant purple beast. The giant purple beast did not even have time to react before it was cut in half by the huge purple sword. Zhuowen landed on the ground. Before he could turn around, a sense of danger rose in his heart. The purple sword in his hand suddenly blasted behind him. Bang! 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 4 continuous attacks smashed onto Zhuowen's purple sword. Zhuowen let out a muffled groan and could not help but retreat. Only then did he realize that the giant purple beast that he had cut in half had turned into the 4 sacred beasts. Just now, it was the 4 sacred beasts that had attacked him 4 times. Zhuowen heaved a sigh of relief. The moment he killed the giant purple beast, he was already on guard against the 4 sacred beasts. That was why he could react in an instant and block the terrifying attacks of the 4 sacred beasts. Speaking of which, Zhuowen still had to thank the black-clothed man. If the black-clothed man had not forced the giant purple beast to reveal its trump card, Zhuowen would not have been able to deal with the giant purple beast's attack. Boom! 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 The moment Zhuowen blocked the attack, the 4 sacred beasts spread out in 4 directions of Zhuowen as if they had teleported and began to attack crazily. Zhuowen's gaze turned cold. The purple sword in his hands suddenly swung out. Instantly, countless purple mist spread out and formed 4 purple ice walls around him, blocking the attack of the 4 sacred beasts. Although the purple ice walls had been completely destroyed by the 4 sacred beasts' attack, it had bought enough time for Zhuowen. The moment the purple ice walls shattered, Zhuowen suddenly rushed towards the purple vermilion bird and the purple white tiger. The purple sword in his hands mercilessly pierced into the space between the 2 sacred beasts' eyebrows. Poochie! The moment the sword pierced into the space between the vermilion bird and the white tiger's eyebrows, the azure dragon and the black tortoise's attacks mercilessly bombarded Zhuowen's chest. Zhuowen knew that if he wanted to instantly kill the white tiger and the vermilion bird, he would have to withstand the attacks of the azure dragon and the black tortoise. Poochie! Zhuowen suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood. He flew backwards in a sorry state and heavily smashed into the purple fence at the edge of the barrier. And because of this, Zhuowen killed the vermilion bird and the white tiger. The azure dragon and the black tortoise were unable to restrain their anger. With a roar, they turned into 2 purple lights and chased after Zhuowen. Zhuowen stood up and instantly slashed out with the purple sword in his hand. Instantly, the boundless purple intent turned into a terrifying ocean. This ocean was completely purple. Within this purple ocean, time and space seemed to have frozen. At the end of the violet sea, a violet sun slowly rose, and a strand of the energy of Space Tao Insight that was combined with Space Tao Insight gushed out violently from the violet sun. The violent energy was like a flood that had breached a dam, and it was too terrifying. The moment the azure dragon and the black tortoise entered the purple ocean, their bodies stiffened. It would be difficult for them to move an inch in this purple ocean. The azure dragon and the black tortoise constantly cried out. In this purple ocean, they felt the threat of death and fear. The terrifying purple waves slammed against the two huge beasts, causing them to totter as if they would fall at any moment. Zhuowen looked at all of this with a confused gaze. Earlier, when he saw the white tiger and the azure dragon pounce at him at the same time, he subconsciously used the time and space ability, Sun over the Sea. But the moment he used it, it was as if he was still in the state of Tao Intent. He had actually merged the power of Tao Intent into the time and space ability by accident. But to Zhuo Wen's pleasant surprise, the might of the space-time divine ability that was fused with Tao Insights had actually increased by too much, and its might caused even him, the one that executed it, to feel deep terror. The instant the purple sun completely rose to its highest point, the purple ocean completely boiled and exploded. Countless waves rushed into the sky. The terrifying energy seemed to be able to destroy the world. Bang, bang, bang. Continuous sounds of explosions came from the purple ocean. The azure dragon and the black tortoise, who were in the purple ocean, cried out in grief and completely disappeared in the purple ocean. Under this terrifying ability, countless cracks and marks appeared on the tough and terrifying purple barrier around them. In the end, it completely exploded. Chapter 2474. Tyrannical Tao Slaughtering Technique. Zhuowen, thank you. Thank you for freeing us. I think you must be very confused about all of this. Take this, everything you want to know about the door of profundity is inside. Suddenly, a weak voice sounded. Not far away, the black-clothed man struggled to stand up and tossed a thumb-sized purple crystal to Zhuowen. At this moment, the black-clothed man's entire body was suffused with purple light. This purple light was constantly disintegrating the black-clothed man's body. It was obvious that the black-clothed man couldn't hold on for much longer. You should be the Su clan's ancestor, right? Zhuowen put away the purple crystal and asked calmly. The black-clothed man nodded and said, Yes, I am indeed the Su clan's ancestor. I originally thought that I could revive the Su clan, but I didn't expect that I would implicate the great Su clan. I am the Su clan's eternal sinner. This purple crystal contains the Su clan's lost cultivation technique. I hope that Zhuo Xiaoyu can finish learning it and help me hand it to the Su clan. If the Su clan has already perished, Zhuo Xiaoyu can take it yourself. After he finished speaking, the black-clothed man's eyes revealed a look of relief. Shortly after, his entire body dissipated into specks of purple light. Wait a moment. When Zhuowen still planned to ask how to leave this place, the black-clothed man had already completely dissipated into nothingness. Zhuowen frowned slightly. He looked at the surrounding purple mist and was somewhat troubled. Although he had escaped from the purple cage, he didn't know how to leave this place. Let's see what's inside this purple crystal first. Zhuowen sighed lightly. He planned to open the purple crystal and take a look. He knew that since the black-clothed man gave this purple crystal to him, there must be something important inside. As for the Su family's lost cultivation technique, Zhuowen did not take it to heart. The Su family was so weak, so how strong could the cultivation technique passed down in this family be? He mainly wanted to see the purple jade obtained by the Su clan's ancestor and the origin of this mysterious door of profundity. When he was comprehending Tao Insight all those years ago, he'd once seen the door of profundity, and even the Grand Pure One was extremely fearful and fervent towards it. However, the door of profundity that appeared at that time was merely an illusory door, while the one Zhuowen was currently in was a real door of profundity. This purple crystal was a storage divine tool, and the space inside was even larger than Zhuowen's spirit ring. The space within the purple crystal was indeed large, but there were very few things inside. Aside from a few jade slips, there were some scattered divine medicines, divine weapons, divine stones, and so on. Furthermore, Zhuowen discovered that the divine herbs, divine weapons, and divine stones had all lost their divinity, and the luster on their surface had dimmed. He knew that this was because these things had been here for too long. It could be seen that the black-robed man had been trapped here for who knew how many years. Even the divine medicine and divine weapons had completely lost their divine nature. Zhuowen knew that the only useful things in the purple crystal were those few jade slips. There were a total of 4 jade slips, and Zhuowen took them all out and looked through them one by one. The first 2 were diary-like things, and they recorded everything the black-robed man had seen and heard while he was still alive. Zhuowen directly skipped these 2 jade slips and started to look through the 3rd jade slip. It's actually a divine ability, and it's even a Dao confirmation divine ability? The instant Zhuowen picked up the 3rd jade slip, he was completely stunned. Because when he just looked at the introduction of this jade slip, he discovered that this jade slip actually recorded a Dao confirmation divine ability. Zhuowen felt that it was slightly inconceivable. How could a mere Su clan possess a Dao confirmation divine ability? This wouldn't be the Su clan's inherited cultivation technique, right? Zhuowen swallowed his saliva and muttered to himself with a slight tremble. However, after looking through it once, Zhuowen was slightly disappointed because this Dao confirmation divine ability was incomplete, and it was extremely incomplete. This divine ability was called the tyrannical Dao slaughtering technique. According to the introduction, this technique could kill the heavenly Dao master once it was refined to the large success stage. Zhuowen didn't know what kind of existence the heavenly Dao master was, but he knew that the heavenly Dao master should be a realm among Dao confirmation experts. Judging from this introduction, this tyrannical Dao slaughtering technique was extremely powerful, especially when it was refined to the large success stage. It could actually kill the so-called heavenly Dao master. Unfortunately, this tyrannical Dao slaughtering technique was extremely incomplete. This technique had a total of 3 moves, but there was only 1 move in it. Originally, Zhuowen thought that this tyrannical Dao slaughtering technique was a Dao confirmation divine ability after all, so there should be a cultivation limit to cultivating this divine ability. However, after looking through it several times, he found that there were no restrictions in it. Thinking of this, Zhuowen's eyes lit up. If there were no restrictions on cultivation, it meant that he could comprehend and cultivate it now. Zhuowen put away the tyrannical Dao slaughtering technique. He didn't plan to comprehend it now. Now, he planned to find the exit first. Thinking of this, Zhuowen picked up the last jade slip and began to read the contents inside. He knew that this jade slip should record the origins of the purple jade and the door of profundity, as well as why the Su family's geniuses of the past were trapped in the door of profundity. After reading it, Zhuowen put down the jade slip, his eyes filled with shock. The door of profundity is a passage to another, larger world? Zhuowen muttered in a low voice, but his gaze became extremely serious. The contents of the jade slip were completely recorded by the black-clothed man. The black-clothed man accidentally found the core of this abandoned star and found the door of profundity. He also obtained the mysterious purple jade from the door of profundity. Relying on the purple jade, the black-clothed man quickly comprehended Dao intent. With the help of Dao intent, his cultivation speed was even faster than before. Soon, he became a famous expert in the 6 Desires heavenly domain and attracted the attention of the experts in the 6 Desires palace. However, when the black-clothed man's Dao intent rose to the 8th level, he would be summoned by the door of profundity. At that time, the black-clothed man left the purple jade in the Su family as a keepsake for the patriarch. However, he didn't expect that it would never return. The purple jade was passed down generation after generation. Because of the purple jade, the Sioux family could produce powerful geniuses in every generation. However, every generation's geniuses would mysteriously disappear. The black-clothed man was the first person to enter the door of profundity. In the beginning, the door of profundity didn't have a Tao intent barrier. The black-clothed man walked aimlessly in the door of profundity for nearly 1,000 years. At the edge of the door of profundity, he saw a transparent barrier. This barrier was extremely strange. He could see the other side of the barrier, but the living beings on the other side couldn't see him. The black-clothed man stayed on this side of the barrier for hundreds of years. During these hundreds of years, he had been observing the other side of the barrier. He was surprised to find that the other side of the barrier wasn't the Six Desires heavenly domain. It wasn't even a place in any of the 8 heavenly domains. Chapter 2475. Barrier. Moreover, he also saw countless powerhouses in that world. The 2 extremes of life and death, which were extremely rare in the Six Desires Palace, were simply too common in that world. The black-robed man even saw many powerhouses that even he couldn't see through. The aura of these powerhouses was far stronger than the 2 extremes of life and death. He knew that these powerhouses were definitely the legendary Tao-confirming powerhouses. It was precisely because he saw so many terrifying powerhouses that the black-robed man guessed that the other side of the door of profundity should be another terrifying world. Until one day, a strange purple light rushed out from the other side of the door of profundity. This purple light ignored the barrier of the door of profundity and actually directly passed through the barrier to enter the door of profundity. Soon after, this purple light transformed into 4 giant beasts, which were the masters of Tao that the black-clothed man spoke of. The next thing that happened was that the masters of Tao intent set up a barrier in the door of profundity and began to raise the cultivators who entered the door of profundity from the outside world, allowing these cultivators to provide nutrients for their Tao intent for free. The other world that the door of profundity leads to. Could it be the 9th heaven, that palace Master Jing Yun mentioned? Zhuowen muttered to himself, but in his heart, he was 90% sure that the powerful world should be the 9th heaven. What's strange about Zhuowen is that the 4 giant beasts aren't creatures from the 8 heavens, but from the 9th heaven. When Zhuowen saw the 4 giant beasts and the purple jade before, he thought that the door of profundity was related to Tai Ching, but now it seems that it doesn't have much to do with Tai Ching. The power of this Tao intent probably came from the 9th heaven. It's just that Zhuowen was puzzled. Tai Ching was just the master of a small heaven among the 8 heavens, so why did he have the power of Tao intent? Moreover, with Tai Ching's comprehension and strength, Zhuowen knew that the former must have comprehended the 9th level Tao intent, and the realm of the Tao intent he grasped was definitely above his own. Thinking of this, Zhuowen felt that Tai Ching was becoming more and more mysterious. After putting away the jade slip, Zhuowen followed the direction indicated on the jade slip and walked forward, and it wasn't long before he arrived at the edge of the door of profundity. At the edge of the door of profundity, there was indeed a barrier. The surface of the barrier rippled like a wall of water, and he could clearly see the scenery on the other side of the barrier. Outside the barrier was a vast starry sky, and in the center of this vast starry sky, there was a huge floating continent that was much larger than the 8 heavens. This continent was surrounded by countless suns, moons, and stars. Inside the continent, there are countless life forms and vast amounts of rich energy. Looking at the huge and boundless continent, Zhuowen's eyes lit up. He knew that the starry sky in front of him should be the 9th heaven. I wonder if I can enter the 9th heaven through this barrier? Zhuowen muttered to himself. He stretched out his right hand and touched the barrier. He was surprised to find that ripples appeared on the surface of the barrier, but it did not resist him. Soon, Zhuowen's right hand reached out of the barrier. Zhuowen retracted his right hand and his eyes became cold. He didn't plan to go to the 9th heaven for now. Not to mention that he still has many things to do in the 8 heavens. With his current strength, going to the 9th heaven is just asking for trouble. From the jade slip given to him by the man in black, he knew that the two extremes of life and death are extremely common in the 9th heaven. It can be seen that the overall strength of the 9th heaven is far beyond that of the 8 heavens. Moreover, there are still some secrets in the 8 heavens that he doesn't know. Also, he has to fulfill the promise of the mysterious head, so it's not appropriate to leave the 8 heavens now. Zhuowen's eyes flickered and he sighed softly. When the time is right, I will come here again, and then enter the 9th heaven through this door of profundity. Zhuowen has a feeling that this door of profundity has a barrier that leads to the 9th heaven. This is definitely a major news that will cause a sensation in the 8 heavens. Although he doesn't know if there are other ways for the cultivators of the 8 heavens to go to the 9th heaven, he knows that in the past, only Tao-confirming powerhouses can leave the 8 heavens. It can be seen that the price for the 8 heavens to go to the 9th heaven is extremely high. But he has the door of profundity that allows him to go to the 9th heaven without paying any price. If this is known by the masters of the 8 heavens, it will probably cause them to take action together. After looking at the barrier again, Zhuowen left this place and left the door of profundity along the original path. Standing in front of the door of profundity, Zhuowen found that only 3 days have passed in the outside world, but he felt like more than 10 years have passed in the door of profundity. Zhuowen arranged a concealment array outside the door of profundity, and at the same time, a terrifying chain of killing arrays and illusion arrays. At the same time, he strengthened the outer defense of the star core a lot before leaving this place with peace of mind. This star itself has reached the end of its life, so it is generally difficult to attract the attention of other cultivators. In addition, Zhuowen arranged a concealment array, so even if Palace Master Wu Ju comes in person, he won't be able to find the door of profundity here. In addition, Zhuowen also arranged a temporary teleportation array nearby. The next time he wants to come here, he can activate the teleportation array and directly teleport here. It won't be so troublesome. After doing this, Zhuowen left this place. He plans to return to Heavenly Spirit Star and hand the tyrannical Tao slaughtering technique to the Su family. After all, this is the only thing that the black-clothed man left for the Su family. Of course, before handing it to the Su family, Zhuowen has already memorized the contents of the first move of the tyrannical Tao slaughtering technique. On the way to Heavenly Spirit Star, Zhuowen also silently comprehended this powerful divine ability. In addition, Zhuowen is also modifying his space-time divine ability. He plans to combine the space-time divine ability with Tao intent, so that the power of the purple sun displayed will be much stronger than the broken sun. Moreover, Zhuowen has always been worried that there will be problems with the Tao intent he learned from the Taiching sect. However, ever since he entered the door of profundity, Zhuowen can feel that the Tao intent on his body has completely transformed. The faintly discernible obstruction in the past has completely disappeared. Zhuowen knows that the obstruction should come from the Taiching sect. However, after experiencing the baptism of the door of profundity, he finally completely got rid of the hidden danger that the Taiching sect caused in his Tao intent. My strength is still too weak. If my strength can reach the life enlightenment realm, I'm afraid I can use the door of profundity for my own use. Zhuowen secretly shook his head, but soon became a little distressed. His purpose of coming to the Su family's forbidden area is to leave the 6 desires heavenly realm. Now there is indeed a place to leave the 6 desires heavenly realm, but it is a boundary that leads to the 9th heaven. It seems that I can only let my clone pass through the 19th wind disaster as soon as possible. With the help of Great Brahma's trick on my clone, I can be directly teleported to the Tower of Hanoi. Chapter 2476. Massacring Finger. As he had found out the truth about Su family's forbidden land, Zhuowen wasn't in a hurry to rush back. He took his time and comprehended tyrannical art of massacring finger as he flew. Tyrannical art of massacring finger was indeed exquisite. From Zhuowen's point of view, the power of tyrannical art of massacring finger was above his spacetime magic. Even if his spacetime magic and Tao meaning were combined to create the purple sun on the sea, it wouldn't be comparable to the first move of tyrannical art of massacring finger. The first move of tyrannical art of massacring finger was called massacring finger. From the introduction, it seemed that massacring finger used one's finger as a medium to trigger the descent of Heaven Wei and transform into a terrifying finger of Heaven Wei. Plus, the finger of Heaven Wei had a form and was extremely powerful, enough to kill the master of Heaven Wei. Of course, it varied from person to person. Killing the master of Heaven Wei was naturally the realm of the master of Heaven Wei. If Zhuowen were to learn tyrannical art of massacring finger, with his current cultivation, wouldn't he be courting death if he were to perform massacring finger to attack the master of Heaven Wei? While comprehending, Zhuowen also tried to perform tyrannical art of massacring finger. However, in the end, Zhuowen couldn't withstand the terrifying power of Heaven Wei. Hence, he didn't perform it successfully in the end. Of course, if Zhuowen were to perform tyrannical art of massacring finger with all his might, he would be able to succeed. However, the price he would have to pay would be terrifying. It could be said that if it wasn't because he had no other choice, Zhuowen really didn't intend to perform the move. Of course, in Zhuowen's estimation, if his doppelganger could become real God triple extreme, he could completely ignore the backlash of tyrannical art of massacring finger. With real God triple extreme strong physique, he could withstand the backlash of Heaven Wei. Besides, when his original body's cultivation reached the extremities of life and death, he could forcefully perform tyrannical art of massacring finger. Half a month later, Zhuowen returned to Tianling Star. When he returned to Suzhou City, he immediately realized that something was wrong. Suzhou City was terrifyingly quiet and there was no sign of life. Zhuowen's gaze hardened. His will radiated outwards, and he discovered that there was no one in Suzhou. It was as if everyone had evaporated into thin air. What's going on? Where's the Su family? Zhuowen had an ominous feeling in his heart. His divine sense radiated out again and instantly covered the entire Heavenly Spirit planet. Then, he realized that Heavenly Spirit planet was empty. There were no other living creatures. Zhuowen's consciousness entered the depths of the Heavenly Spirit planet. Immediately, he discovered a huge blood fiend array within the planet's core. This blood fiend array was much bigger than the one set up by the heretic cultivator. Its influence was enough to cover the entire Heavenly Spirit planet. Zhuowen's eyes were gloomy. He thought of a bad possibility. The blood fiend array hidden deep in the planet's core might have refined the entire Heavenly Spirit planet. Eh? You actually came back. I thought you ran away with your tail between your legs. In the sky above Heavenly Spirit planet, two figures appeared. One of them was a middle-aged man wearing blood-red clothes. Zhuowen was extremely unfamiliar with this person. He had never seen him before. However, beside the man in blood-red clothes was a young woman with a voluptuous figure. Zhuowen was not unfamiliar with her. This young woman was the palace master of Xiang Desire Palace, Xiang Lan. Where are the people on Heavenly Spirit planet? Zhuowen asked with a gloomy face. They're all dead. It's all because of you. If it weren't for you, they wouldn't have died. That's why the people on Heavenly Spirit planet died because of you. Xiang Lan indifferently looked down at Zhuowen. Zhuowen slowly calmed down. However, the murderous intent in his eyes was like a volcano erupting. It surged out violently. To the people on Heavenly Spirit planet, he was just a passerby. There was no one there that was worthy of his nostalgia. However, Su was the first person he had met from Heavenly Spirit planet. Thinking about how an innocent girl like Su had been cruelly killed, the anger in Zhuowen's heart was like a flood. Die! Zhuowen let out a low roar. His right foot suddenly stomped on the void, and his entire body shot out, rushing towards the man in blood-red clothes and Xiang Lan. The man in blood-red clothes took a few steps back, looked at Xiang Lan beside him, and said with a flattering smile, "Palace Master Xiang Lan, I'll leave this boy to you." The man in blood-red clothes had seen the video of the battle between Zhuowen and Kuang Li. He was extremely wary of the space-time divine ability that this boy possessed. He was very self-aware. He knew that with his strength, he really couldn't resist the space-time divine ability that Zhuowen used. Therefore, he wisely didn't intend to intervene. Xiang Lan snorted lightly. She didn't care much about Zhuowen. Although Zhuowen's previous performance in Six Desires Palace was extraordinary, he was only an 8 steps void heaven expert after all. In her eyes, an 8 steps void heaven expert was no different from an ant. She was a dignified life enlightenment expert. She could completely crush this boy. Long One, don't worry. I won't kill you. Instead, I'll capture you alive and bring you to Palace Master Wu Ju. You're just an ant with an 8 steps void heaven expert. How dare you touch Six Desires Palace's desireless? As Xiang Lan spoke, she formed a seal with her jade-like hands. Immediately, countless ice crystals condensed in front of her, condensing into a huge ice pagoda. The tip of the ice pagoda was extremely sharp, and it emitted a brilliance that was difficult to look at. Whoosh! Xiang Lan waved her hand, and the ice pagoda quickly shot out, rushing straight towards Zhuowen. After doing this, Xiang Lan crossed her arms in front of her chest and coldly looked at Zhuowen, who was rushing in front of her. In her opinion, this Zhuowen couldn't block her ice pagoda at all. Although this ice pagoda was just a casual attack, she had used a powerful profound life divine power. It wasn't something that a cultivator below the life enlightenment realm could casually resist. The corner of Zhuowen's mouth was full of a sneer. This Xiang Lan was really too arrogant. She actually looked down on him. This wasn't the first time he faced a life enlightenment realm expert. Before he advanced to the 8 steps void heaven, he had killed Lu Haotian, who was at the life enlightenment realm in the divine pill secret realm. Although Lu Haotian wasn't killed by Zhuowen, at that time, Lu Haotian couldn't kill Zhuowen even if he attacked with his full strength. But now, Zhuowen was no longer the same as before. Not only had his cultivation advanced to the 8 steps void heaven, but he had also comprehended the 9th level Tao intent in the door of profundity. He had also learned the tyrannical Tao slaughtering technique. Not to mention Xiang Lan's casual attack. Even if she attacked with her full strength, it wouldn't be much of a threat to Zhuowen. Zhuowen was in midair. He took out the king's sword in his hand and fiercely attacked. The deathly aura attached to the surface of the king's sword condensed into a terrifying sword light, which violently swept out. Rumble! The huge ice pagoda was directly shattered by the deathly aura sword light. Zhuowen stepped on countless ice shards and quickly rushed in front of Xiang Lan. The king's sword in his hand directly pierced towards Xiang Lan's heart. Xiang Lan's beautiful eyes shrank. She looked at Zhuowen, who had already rushed in front of her, in disbelief. She didn't expect that a mere 8 steps void heaven ant would be able to break her attack so easily. Poochie! Xiang Lan only had time to avoid her vital points, and her chest was pierced by the king's sword. Chapter 2477. Killing a life comprehension realm expert. Zhuowen let out a muffled groan and could not help but retreat a few hundred steps. On the other hand, Xiang Lan spat out a mouthful of blood and retreated a few thousand steps. She covered her wound and looked at Zhuowen in shock. She had never thought that a mere 8 steps void sky cultivator would be able to injure a life comprehension realm expert like her. The man in blood-red clothes, who had already dodged in advance, looked at this scene as if he had seen a ghost. He was even more shocked than Xiang Lan. He had seen the video of the battle between Zhuowen and Kuang Li too many times. He knew how strong this kid was. He might be stronger than a 9-steps void sky cultivator, but there was a huge gap between him and a life comprehension realm expert. But now, this kid had not even used his space-time divine ability, and he was actually able to injure a life comprehension realm expert like Xianglan. This really shocked the man in blood-red clothes. How is this kid an 8-steps void sky cultivator? He's simply a life comprehension realm expert. Damn it, I have to leave this place quickly. After discovering Zhuo Wen's strength, the crimson-robed man immediately had the intention to retreat. Soon after, he slowly retreated. He planned to take advantage of the time when Zhuo Wen and Xianglan were still fighting to leave this place. However, he soon realized that a large hand had suddenly appeared behind him and grabbed his neck. The man in blood-red clothes wanted to struggle, but he was shocked to find that he was like a doll in this large hand. It was impossible to resist. You, doppelganger? The man in blood-red clothes looked at the black-clothed Zhuowen in front of him and then looked at the white-clothed Zhuowen not far away. He immediately guessed that this black-clothed Zhuowen should be the doppelganger of Zhuowen's main body. Xianglan also noticed the situation here. However, she could not even deal with Zhuowen's main body now, so how could she care about the man in blood-red clothes? Where are the people from Suzhou City? Are all the people from Heavenly Spirit Star dead? No one escaped? The black-clothed Zhuowen asked coldly. The man in the blood-red robe revealed a look of fear. He trembled as he said, "No, I didn't escape. However, I didn't do it. It was the Six Desires Palace who ordered me to do it. I was only following orders." Murderous intent surged in Zhuowen's eyes. He was not in the mood to continue listening to the man in crimson clothes. A black devouring vortex appeared in his right palm, and the man in crimson clothes was completely devoured by the vortex. Then, the black-clothed man stood behind Xianglan to prevent her from escaping. Xianglan's beautiful eyes turned serious. She looked at Zhuowen and said, "Long One, I underestimated you. How about this, if you let me go, I won't pursue the matter of you offending me." Zhuowen sneered, "Palace Master Xianglan, why should I let you go? Even if I let you go, will your Six Desire Palace let me go?" Xianglan's beautiful eyes sank, and she said, "Long One, there's no enmity between you and Six Desires Palace, so there's no need for you to go against Six Desires Palace. So long as you let me go and hand Desireless over, then I'll definitely plead for mercy for you before Palace Master Wuju." Xianglan's words were quickly cut off by Zhuowen. "Palace Master Xianglan, do you know why I want to take Desireless away?" Zhuowen said with a gloomy gaze. Xianglan was taken aback. Actually, she was also confused about why Zhuowen wanted to take Desireless away. In her opinion, Zhuowen did not have any motive to take Desireless away. After all, Desireless was useless to other people, but he was extremely important to Six Desire Palace. Taking Desireless away was naturally standing against Six Desire Palace. Xianglan was also very confused. Long One was only a loose cultivator, so why did he want to take Desireless away for no reason? That's because Desireless is the most important person to me. Back then, when your people from the Six Desires Palace took Desireless away, you all vowed to me that you would guarantee Desireless safety and provide him with a very good cultivation environment. But now I can only see that Desireless was forced by your Palace Master Wujue to cultivate the Desireless cultivation technique, and in the end, he became such a Desireless. Tell me, why should I take Desireless away? Zhuowen's gaze was surging with killing intent as he coldly said each word. Xianglan's beautiful face turned pale. Soon after, she calmly said, "It's your friend's honor to be able to become a Desireless. You should know that becoming a Desireless means that reaching the Tao realm won't be very difficult for her. In fact, it might even become very easy. This is your friend's fortune." Zhuowen was too lazy to pay attention to Xianglan's nonsense. He did not believe that Palace Master Wujue would be so kind as to allow Moyan Wushang to cultivate the desireless cultivation technique. There was definitely a secret behind it. Moreover, from Xiang Lan's words, he could tell that Moyan Wushang did not do it willingly. Thinking of this possibility, the anger in Zhuowen's heart grew even more. Moyan Wushang had paid too much for him. In the past, his strength was too low, so he was unable to compensate Moyan Wushang. Originally, he thought that Moyan Wushang joining Six Desire Palace was a great fortune, but he never expected that Six Desire Palace would become her grave. Zhuowen no longer wanted to listen to Xiang Lan's explanation. He was ready to teach Six Desire Palace a lesson. Today, Xiang Lan must die here. Xiang Lan's beautiful eyes were filled with killing intent as she coldly said, "You still want to go against Six Desire Palace? Then don't blame me for being impolite." As she spoke, Xiang Lan flipped her lily-white hand, and a sparkling and translucent hexahedral ice crystal appeared in her palm. Xiang Lan waved her lily-white hand and threw out the ice crystal. In an instant, the ice crystal turned into countless ice arrows. These ice arrows were not ordinary ice arrows, but ice arrows that contained a trace of the Heavenly Way's law. Its power was extremely terrifying. Zhuowen coldly snorted. His left hand grasped the void, and a strange purple intent appeared in his palm. The purple intent burst out and turned into rolling purple mist. In this rolling purple mist, dense purple crystals scattered. Bang! 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 The moment the ice arrows came into contact with the purple crystals, they all shattered. Then, countless purple crystals condensed into a terrifying purple spear that pierced through the air and charged towards Xiang Lan. Xiang Lan's pupils contracted. Her lily-white hand suddenly pressed forward. Countless ice crystals condensed and turned into an extremely thick ice wall, blocking in front of her. Unfortunately, the ice wall only lasted for a moment before it was penetrated by the terrifying purple spear. Xiang Lan only felt a pain in her chest. She stared blankly at the purple spear in her chest and spat out a mouthful of blood. What kind of power is this? It's not the mysterious life divine energy at all, Xiang Lan said intermittently. Soon after, her entire body turned into a purple crystal. With a cracking sound, it shattered into countless powder. At this moment, the everlasting ice lotus was floating above Zhuowen's head. At this moment, the everlasting ice lotus was filled with purple intent. Zhuowen knew that the reason why he could kill Xiang Lan so easily was because of the Tao Will. He relied on the powerful amplification of the Tao Will and used it in the everlasting ice lotus, causing the mysterious life divine energy in the everlasting ice lotus to increase by 9 times in an instant. 9 times the mysterious life divine energy of the life enlightenment state could fight against an expert of the death enlightenment state. How could Xiang Lan resist it? After killing Xiang Lan, Zhuowen took out the spacetime wheel. He sighed and looked at the heavenly spirit star, which had become a completely abandoned planet, and left this place. He had to leave the Six Desires heavenly realm now. Although he knew that the border of the Six Desires heavenly realm might be heavily guarded by the Six Desires palace, he still wanted to try. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.